Good evening, cryptid fans, Bigfoot fans, Dogman, all that good stuff. Cracker T, and the world famous D.A. Roberts. Man, what a star-studded show we got tonight, huh?
I think I would
Chat's
use the word infamous more than famous.
But anyway, chat's rolling along really good. We're glad to see everybody in here, and I'm sure more will be coming in. And yeah, this show's going to be a true treat.
Hopefully, the beardless lumberjack makes an appearance if he ever.
Yeah, we're still waiting on Brother Blaylock. He's going to try to get in here. He's working, I guess, out of town, staying with his son or something. So,
over there in Rosebud,
having some automobile problems too. He was so. Hopefully, he'll get snuck in here shortly. And like, subscribe, share. It's free. It don't cost you a thing. And by all means, we do have a great show. Some more reports just came in. Got some information we won't discuss now, but pretty cool deal here in the county, huh, Jeff?
Yeah,
as quiet as it's got for now. But anyway, I like to scare him a little
bit. The rabbit hole, Spencer Jameson warned me once you go down the rabbit hole, the hole just keeps going.
You ain't wrong.
No. Yeah. The more questions you think you got answered, you can tenfold that you got to ask yet. So it's crazy.
I gotta stop telling Greg and him about Dogman, or they'll never come to this camp.
I tried to talk him into going to Joe Bald with me, and he's like, "No, I don't think I want to."
Who, Greg?
No, Spencer.
Yeah, Spencer's not.
Greg was like, "Yeah, come on, I'll go."
Well, Greg will sit at the truck with whatever artillery he brought with him. So.
But anyway, we'll go ahead and get kicked off here. I mean, DA, you don't need any introduction. Everybody knows who you are, but some of us are still fairly new to you. And I'm just going to ask you to go ahead and introduce who you are and what you do, what you did, and what got you into this.
Well, my name is D.A. Roberts. I'm a retired cop. Put about 20 years in uniform. Before my back decided I couldn't do that crap anymore because of all the body armor and weight. But I'm still alive and kicking, and still try to keep my hand in when I can. But I'm just a farm kid from the sticks of Missouri, and grew up, hearing weird sounds in the woods. And growing up on a farm in the 1970s, when we had like 2 good channels on a good day, and that was the old black and white TV with the rabbit ears and tinfoil on it. Yeah, I didn't watch much TV. I either had a book in my hand or I was out in the woods. And like I was telling Jerry before the show. When I was growing up, I'd hear things in the woods, or I'd hear odd calls I couldn't identify. And, I would go back and tell my parents about it, and they'd just kind of, "Oh no, you're just imagining things," that kind of thing. Shortly before my grandmother passed away, I mentioned them to her, and her response was totally different. She's like, "Why do you think we plant a garden back there?" So they'll stay away from the house. I was like, "Oh," but I've had a fascination for anything cryptid related since I was a kid. My uncle, I call him my uncle. He was married to my mother's sister. My uncle Buddy, he was full blood Cherokee, and growing up. He was like a second dad to me, and I learned a lot of the old Cherokee lore about it. And he had seen them on the property that he owned. He had a 160-acre farm up near Eldridge, Missouri, and his nearest neighbor was about 3 miles away. He was out in the middle of nowhere. We're not talking gravel road. We're not talking just highway. We're talking narrow 2-lane blacktop that turns into gravel for several miles. And he was in the butt crack of nowhere, somewhere between Lebanon and Camdenton, Missouri, along the Niagara River. And his land, like I said, he had about 160 acres, and it bucked up against about 5,000 acres of conservation land. So any given time of the year, between that spring-fed river on the Niagara, the amount of wild everything that grew out there, and the abundance of deer, you could see those things on his property just about any time. And certain times of the year, I'd go out there and I'd go camp or fish or whatever. And certain times of the year, he'd say, "Hey, this isn't a good time to camp. Won't you stay up at the house tonight?" He would never really elaborate why, but he would not let you camp down in the river bottoms. And then other times of the year it was fine. But I remember one year when I was about 16, he had these old Motorola 2-way radios, and he was at one hunting spot and I was at another on his land. And he said, well, whoever gets a deer first, we'll call the other one and we'll meet up back at the house and dress it out and take care of it. And so I've been waiting, and I finally see a good sized buck. And he was, I mean, the rack on him was beautiful. I was already planning on mounting him. And he comes out and he looks around and gives me the perfect broadside shot. And I took that shot with a soft nose British 303 round. And bang, he went straight down. But as happens with deer, he popped back up and took off. So by the time I got down out of the tree and got over to where he was at, I could see there was a large quantity of blood on the ground. And I'm sure you guys both know what I'm talking about, what we call lung butter.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, found that on the ground. I'm like, oh, I got him. He ain't going far. So I started tracking him, and he was heading toward a part of the land that Uncle Buddy always said to stay away from. And but I'd shot that buck, and I was going to get him, by God. So I tracked the blood trail to a ravine. He like a dry creek bed, and it had jumped down into that ravine. It was about 20 feet down, and I looked down and I could see where it had collapsed in a pile of leaves. It was not moving. I couldn't even see that it was breathing. So I start backtracking down this ravine until I could find a place to get down. And I was gone maybe 15 minutes trying to find a place that was low enough for me to drop down that ravine without breaking a leg. When I get back up there, again, this is all rocky ground because it's a dry creek bed. I get back up there, I find the spot where it had bled out, and there was a tremendous amount of blood, but the deer was gone. And I'm like, where the hell did he go? So I start like spiraling out from where I was at, taking wider and wider circles, and I never found another drop of blood, never found a track. So I get on the radio and I'm like, Uncle Buddy, I think somebody's out here on your land. And he said, what do you mean? I said, I shot a buck and it's gone. No blood draw, no blood trail, no nothing. I tracked it to where he dropped and now it's gone. He said, where are you at? And I told him what the bottoms I was in. He said, that was not a person that took that deer. Get out of there or you will join that deer. So I went back to the house and he said, yeah, he said, that's the part of the land I don't even hunt there. He said, you go out there messing around. If you've got a gun, you may not come back out of there. He said, so stay out of there. And that's exactly why I tell you, don't hunt that part of the land. And that pretty much put the fear of God in me about those things. But he was absolutely adamant. He said, those things can and will hurt you and are far more likely to at certain times of the year. They'd come up around his house and never mess with anything. They'd sometimes raid his garden, but they were never violent toward him that I know of. But he passed away a few years ago and the land was divided up and sold off. So I don't even know who owns it now, but I would guarantee you that land is still active.
Wow. It's amazing the stories you hear from those from back in the day, and yet nothing can be passed, so much said or passed along to show proof or something, you know what I mean? That's amazing. But there's so many stories like that all around the United States, something else.
Right. Well, I got a story from another officer one time when I was at a training seminar, and he was from a county here in Missouri that borders Arkansas. I won't say which county because he's still there, and he didn't want his name mentioned. But he told me, he said, "I'll tell you the story, but I don't want you to ever put my name in it." He said, "But I know you'll be interested to hear this." Well, he had a deer stand, and this is in the Mark Twain. He had a deer stand set up, and he would go out there every year, and that's where he would hunt. Well, one morning during deer season, this was about 2011, 2012. He goes out to that deer stand, gets out there real early, gets up in there and had one of those soft-sided cooler lunch boxes with him. And he said wasn't much in it, an apple, a couple bologna sandwiches, and a bottle of water. That's about it. He says, so I tied it around my leg so I wouldn't drop it. He says, and sat there in a tree waiting for the sun to come up and fell asleep. And he said, I woke up and felt like something was tugging on that lunchbox. He said, so I opened my eyes, and he says, my knees were probably 12, 13 feet off the ground. He said, I opened my eyes, and this thing was standing at my knee looking at me. He said, its head was right even with my knee. He said, it was still dark. He said, all I could see was its eyes and the rough shape of its face, and it wanted that lunchbox. I said, well, what'd you do? He said, I cut the strap and let him have the damn thing. And he said, I wasn't dying over a couple bologna sandwiches. He could have it. And I said, well, then what happened? He said, it just kind of looked at me and took the lunchbox and walked back into the woods. He says, I waited about 15 minutes till I couldn't hear it walking anymore, climbed down out of the deer stand, went back home and sold my deer stuff. He says, I haven't been hunting since. He said, if you want that deer stand, I'll tell you where it's at, but I ain't going back out there.
That's crazy. That's great. How many stories have you heard like that out your way? I mean, Missouri is amazing.
I've heard so many stories. I mean, you get them all the time. One of the coolest ones that I heard was from a Cherokee Indian down near Miami, Oklahoma, and I was talking to him. My wife likes to go to the casinos there on the reservation, and I don't gamble. So I was just kind of walking around and looking at stuff, and stop at the bar once in a while and have a beer. And I struck up a conversation with this old boy, and he was very obviously Native American, had his hair pulled back in a ponytail, and we just got to talking, just kind of shooting the breeze. And I told him I like to going out looking for Bigfoot evidence. And he goes, well, I got a story for you. And I said, what is it? He said, you're not going to believe it. And he said, but I guarantee you every word of it's true. I said, what happened? He said, it wasn't not far from here on the reservation. He says, I was walking along a narrow stream at the edge. There was a little trail cut into the side of the ground there, along this stream. He said, I was going to a place that I like to fish. He said, I rounded a corner and one of those things was standing at the edge of the stream, just plain as day in the middle of the road. He says, in the middle of this trail. He said it was about 8.5 feet tall, completely dark hair. I said, what happened? He goes, well, it realized I was standing there. He says, it turned and kind of looked at me. He says, and then it did something I can't explain. I said, what did it do? He said, it put its hand up over its face like that and took 4 steps back into the foliage, and I couldn't find it anymore. It just disappeared. He said, I don't know if it was blending in, if it went through something. He said, but I know once it got into the brush, I couldn't find it anymore. It was gone.
That's crazy.
That's interesting.
He says, I've tracked and hunted everything you can hunt in the state of Oklahoma, and that thing slipped me like I was an amateur.
I don't know if I'm sure I have ever heard, the hand over the face deal. Like
that was the first time I've heard it too.
Yeah. That's interesting. Maybe probably trying to hide or, oh no, what did I do? Or who knows,
Me personally, I think it was probably obstructing its eyes so the eye shine didn't give it away. So the reflection off its eyes from the daylight.
Was it in the dark?
No, he says it's about dusk.
Okay. Well, I've heard Kumbo talk about him, trying to get behind they think they can hide behind a tree that's a foot wide.
Yeah.
And you can see it on both sides of the tree.
I don't know. I think they would be smarter than that, but hey.
That always struck me as hilarious that they think that they can hide behind something like that.
Exactly. What is your, I want to leap right into this. What is your take on Dogman? I know you have some interesting information about that from one of your expeditions or two or so.
Well, I saw one in LBL 2 years ago, back in 2022. I'd been in LBL for about a week. Nick Valente and I went into LBL to just do some research and look around. And we weren't far from DeMumbers Bay. It was about 10:30 in the morning. And what we were doing is we were driving very slowly down the road looking for primitive campsites back in the trees. And we were going to go back to these little clearings and look for tracks. And I saw something with its arm up against a tree. And it didn't really register what I was looking at. Because it wasn't moving. And when it turned its head to watch us go by, that's when I cued onto the movement and looked right back at it. And then I'm like punching Nick in the shoulder and pointing, and he slammed on the brakes. And we weren't going very fast, just a couple miles an hour. And this thing was standing with, like I said, it was standing with its right hand up against a tree, like it was just leaning there. It was completely black. I could see the hawked legs. And I couldn't really make out any features of the face other than it looked like a wolf-shaped head, but the snout was shorter and blunter, kind of like a mastiff or what's that? I can't remember the name of the dog. It's like a big, heavy Rottweiler. There we go. That was the name of it. Like a wider, blunter Rottweiler. but it and once it realized we had seen it, and I saw it for 15 to 20 seconds, and Nick probably saw it for about 10. And once it realized that we'd stopped, and two, we were looking at it, it turned and it did a really weird loping bound. It didn't run straight. It kind of jumped to the right, jumped to the left, jumped to the right, and then went down a ravine. And we jumped out and went after it, and we could hear it just beating hell through the woods going down that ravine. And it was pretty steep. So I knew there was no way we were going down it without ropes. And of course, at the time, I didn't have a firearm on either. And I looked at Nick. I'm like, I don't think I'm going to chase this thing. And he goes, you know what? That's probably a good idea. I don't think we're going to be able to get down there very well. And as fast as it's moving, we're not going to catch it.
So I went back enough to go after it.
Oh, we're idiots. But we went back over. I went back over to the tree where it was standing. And I looked around on the ground, and the leaf litter was still pretty thick, so I couldn't find any usable tracks. I could see impressions in the leaves where it had ran, but there was no tracks in all that leaf litter. So I started looking at the tree and put my hand right about where I estimated its hand had been. And it was, you know how when you lean against something, you just kind of instinctively put your hand against something at that right comfortable level. Yeah. Well, it was above my comfort zone to reach that. So I'm 5'10". I estimated that thing had to be 6.5, 7 feet tall. It wasn't massive, but it was damn fast. And it wasn't built like super hulking. It had like the narrow chest like a dog would standing on its hind legs, but it never dropped down to all fours, and it was fast. But that's just a kind of a weird sighting. But what got me interested in it was that original tale from LBL. That's why we were there researching about the family of 4 that were killed. And of course, there's numerous stories of hunters going missing and bodies turning up in the LBL. The bow hunter case, where the guy, his camp, they found his camp destroyed and what was left of his body about a half mile away in the woods. There's a lot of stories like that in LBL, and they all get shut up. So that's really got me intrigued in it. But I think that, granted, much like with Bigfoot, the term actual Bigfoot was coined in 1957 by the newspaper reporter talking about Jerry Cruz's casts. So before that, they didn't have the name Bigfoot. They had the Native American names for it. Like every tribe's got its own name, or they call it a wild man or a hairy man or that kind of thing. And just like that, the word dog man didn't really exist before the mid to late 90s. It was coined by a radio DJ up in Michigan, of all things. But before then, you heard stories of Wolfman. You heard stories of, what they would call a werewolf because of the old folklore. But when I really started digging, I discovered that there was another term for dog-like humans, and that term is cynocephali.
Yep.
The cynocephali have been popping up in recorded history since the time of the Greek and the Roman empires. Both the Greeks and the Romans mentioned fighting them in the Indus River Valley and in northern Africa. The Chinese mentioned fighting them in the deep parts of China. So these things were seen under the name cynocephali long before anybody ever heard the term dogman. In fact, Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus both documented cynocephali cases during their journeys. Then you look at, St. Christopher, who's known as the dog-headed saint. Old Catholic iconography shows St. Christopher with the head of a dog. Allegedly, after he performed his first miracle, he was God cured him and he became more human. But a lot of those old Catholic texts still show him with the head of a dog. So there's references to these dog-like creatures way back in history. Another great example is the Pira Rice map. The Pira Rice map was a map that was documented by an admiral named Piri Rice. He was a Turkish admiral in the 8th century, and they believe it was a copy of a much older map. Well, they weren't sure what the map was of. They didn't recognize the coastline. They didn't recognize the terrain until 1972, when the U.S. Navy was doing sonar soundings of Antarctica. And they discovered that the Pira Rice map is a map of Antarctica without ice on it. And in the margins of that map are both Bigfoot and dogman-like creatures.
So evidently they exist, I presume, if they're in the map. I'm sure they've been seen. Okay. Wow, that's interesting.
Well, the Indians didn't put stuff on the wall that didn't exist either, so I don't know why.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, it was just like with Bigfoot. Look at every North American, Native American tribe. They all have their own name and describe a similar creature. I mean, it's not like this is just an isolated case that, somebody from this particular area spotted. It's not remotely isolated to the Pacific Northwest. These are seen by Native American tribes all across the U.S. and Canada and Mexico.
What do you think, as far as the U.S., the balance of the United States being the Northwest, Central, Eastern, and of course the skunk apes to the south? Where do you think the greater balance? If and it sounds like a stupid question, but where do you think everybody originally thinks the Northwest? But when you really start looking around, like where you're from and here, and even south into Florida, there is I think an abundant number here where everybody
Yeah,
thinks you
he's
got to
full
go
of
to the
them.
Northwest or the West.
I think it's very difficult to say where any of the bulk of the population are, because I think they're territorial, kind of like a cougar or a grizzly bear. I think they have a range that covers hundreds of miles. A cougar has a range of about 250 miles, and these things are big predators. They would have to have a range, because if they stayed in one area, they'd eat everything there was to eat in it in 6 months. There'd be nothing left, and they would have to move on. So I think, much like the Native American tribes, I think they follow the herds. I think they follow the food, and I don't think they stay in any one area so very long. Which is why I think down at Joe Bald here on Table Rock Lake, I think that's why I've had encounters in spring and fall, but not in the dead of summer.
Exactly. Same things that's happened here has been October, November, and then nothing. I mean, nothing. No vocalizations, no more eye shine. I mean, I've only saw eye shine one time here, but in this area.
Seems like for me, it's
They
always
move
been
around. They
between,
have
like,
to for food. Yeah.
I
been like
agree. I
between
think they definitely have
October
to move
and
forward.
like March for me that I've noticed.
Yeah. Well, there's been some years back. You and I discussed an incident, Jeff, at your place, and then
Yeah.
here with the skeleton of
Oh,
a
yeah.
deer here. Both front legs broken. So,
You
but
know,
that's not to say that's
deer
what it
just
was.
hang themselves from tree stands after they've been
Right. Right. Yeah.
removed of most of their meat. It's pretty weird, DA, when you walk up to a deer stand and you see a carcass hanging on the ladder like somebody had just draped it over the back of a chair.
Yeah, that's not generally something a black bear or a mountain lion would do. That's something that pretty much takes hands.
People like to try to tell you, oh, it was the neighborhood crackhead or something, and I'm thinking,
Well, when I took my group into Combs Ferry, it was me, Robbie Rains, Wyatt Estes, my old lieutenant two of my lieutenants from when I was a deputy, Alfredo Estrella and James Jenkins, and my son Noah, and Steve Monrotis from the show. All of us, it was 7 of us, went in, and Combs Ferry is on Table Rock Lake, but it was a campground they shut down like 35 years ago without explanation. And they even went so far as to bulldoze off the access roads. You can't get to it by car. So we decided we're going in there, and we had to go in by boat late at night and slipped into Combs Ferry. And we found tracks. We had vocalizations. We had rocks thrown at us. We were paced. And at one point, I was kind of ahead of the group. I was looking at the trail ahead of us because there was a lot of debris. And I've been to a lot of those old abandoned campgrounds where like some of the concrete picnic tables were still intact. No, this place looked like a wasteland. Everything in it was destroyed. There were big rocks everywhere. Those big, thick concrete slabs had been busted. And there was no way they got heavy equipment in there. There was no access. You couldn't have ridden an ATV in there. It was too thick. But I'm kind of looking at the stuff on the ground, and Robbie goes, "Hey, DA, come back here and take a look at this." So I go back, and he's pointing his flashlight at a tree, and I start at the ground and start to look up, and the first thing I noticed was blood on the ground. It was dry, but it was still red, so it wasn't very old. I pan up into the tree, and at about head level in the tree is the front leg and part of the hide of a deer that has been obviously twisted off at the joint. It was not cut off. It was not bitten off. It had been rolled and twisted off at the joint, and it was stuck in the tree. And now my brain immediately starts looking for things that what could explain this. But the tree was about that big around, so there's no way a cougar climbed it. It wasn't, there didn't have any branches big enough to support a cougar. The biggest branches on it were probably about that big around. It would have snapped right off, but it was stuck and woven into the branches on this tree, so we would see it. There were still, tufts of hair on it. There was no flies or no maggots, so it hadn't been there long enough to go septic. That had been just recently put there. And I'm like, what do you think that is? He goes, I think that's a warning. And I said, I would definitely agree with that. So we start on down the trail, and we're kind of making our way toward the back of the old campground. And it's a pretty big area, and it's very overgrown. So I'm continuing to kind of head on down, and not 20 yards down the trail, on the opposite side of the trail, we found a fish head jammed into a tree, jammed into the wedge of a tree. And it looked like it had had the head ripped off of it. It hadn't been fed on by birds or anything like that. It was stuck down in the craw of this tree. And this tree was no more than that big around. There was no way anything bigger than a raccoon could have climbed that tree without breaking it. It was a small sapling. And that fish head was right there in the top of that tree, right where we could see it. And I'm like, all right, now I'm starting to get the heebie-jeebies. There's something in here telling us something. And we would hear, rocks and stuff coming in from different sides. And at one time, we heard pacing on both sides of us. But we're on a peninsula out into the middle of Table Rock Lake with deep water on all sides. So so we stopped and started looking around, and people are starting to get pretty edgy. I'm like, all right, we can go back to where we put in and call the boat in. Or if I'm reading this correct, the old boat ramp should still be up here about another 300 yards. And they're like, well, it'll be easier for the boat to get into the boat ramp. Let's make for that. The closer we got to the boat ramp, the more we could hear stuff. And I'm starting to get a little nervous at this point. And Steve had hurt his knee pretty bad. So we called the boat in. We had walkie-talkies with the guy on the boat. And we get back to the boat ramp, and he comes in. And it was just a small bass boat. We had to come in groups. So I sent Steve and Jenkins out first because Steve was hurt, and none of Jenkins was going to keep his head and would be able to protect Steve. So they go out, and then it's about 15 minutes before the boat comes back, and I send two more out. Then it's just me, Robbie, and my son Noah. And once it was just the three of us, you could hear them getting closer. I couldn't get eye shine. I couldn't catch anything on camera, but I would hear a twig snap or a rock hit the ground, and they were getting steadily closer. And the boat was a small boat, and it was only able to hold two people at a time. And I said, all right, well, if only two are going, Robbie, I want you and Noah to go. I'll stay. And Robbie's like, you're crazy. You can't stay. If you stay here by yourself, we're not going to find you when we come back. And I said, well, you only get two on the boat. He said, well, let's see if we can get three. And when he pulled back in, we told him what was going on. He goes, yeah, we're going to make it work. Everybody get on the boat. And as soon as we backed out into the water, we could hear it moving right up hear stuff moving right up to the boat ramp. Never came out where we could see it, but we definitely felt like we were unwelcome, and we're being, strongly encouraged to go about our business. And we went back across the lake and got out of there. And when Wyatt and Richard, the two guys that had the boat, went to take the boat out at the launch, they found 17-inch footprints, an inch and a half into the rocky soil, right next to where they'd parked their boat trailer.
Oh man! Now you know why they closed the park, maybe, huh?
Yeah,
or campground, whatever.
So we're planning on going back. We went in. It was in July. It was hot as hell, and I was surprised we were getting activity. But that area is so remote. There's never people out there. So I figured if we're going to have activity, it'll be because there's nobody there. And I want to go back when the weather starts cooling off, when the ticks and the bugs ain't so bad. I probably ate a pound of protein just inhaling bugs when we were on the ground there. They were thicker than thieves.
Wow, that's a cool story. Man. Well, it ain't a story; it's a happening.
If you guys ever find your way out Missouri way, I'll take you guys in there.
Are you game, Jeffrey?
Oh, trust me, I'd be down. As Doc say, 4 flat tires.
Heck yeah. Take you guys down to Joe Bald too.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Yeah, that would
I
be
already
great.
told Greg I'm not wearing peanut butter when I go anywhere.
Yeah, right. You sure?
I mean, if he feeds me some of that good cooking of his, he might be able to hook me into it. But
With that Alabama white sauce.
I still haven't tried it, but Spencer thinks I have, and he gives me hell for it all the time.
I'm gonna make some one of these nights. Greg sent me the recipe, so I'm
Yeah.
gonna make some and try it. I love barbecue. Hell, I had barbecue for dinner tonight before I came on here.
There you go. Yeah, I wouldn't mind trying that. I'd try it for sure. The white sauce, yeah. So what about in that area? Did you see like a lot of tree structures, or probably? I guess you were more concerned about what other animal parts you were going to find in trees.
The thing about Combs Ferry, and Joe Bald is another campground that's been closed like 20, 25 years. But in Joe Bald, you can still drive back in there. They didn't bulldoze it off. The roads are in decent shape. They're kind of rough. But some of those the camping areas in Joe Bald look like you could just clear back the underbrush and camp there. I mean, some of those are still in really good shape. However, Combs Ferry looks more like post-apocalyptic. I mean, it is just destroyed. And at one point, right in the middle of the trail, we found one of those big concrete tabletops off of one of the picnic tables, flipped over and in the middle of the trail, about 20, 25 feet from where it had been on what was left of the picnic table.
Yeah, I wonder how heavy that was.
Oh, I would guess probably 1,500 to 2,000 pounds. It was probably 7 feet long by about 4 feet wide by about 6 inches thick of concrete and rebar.
Yeah, yeah. I got you. Yeah.
The whole tabletop had been thrown into the middle of the trail. There were no marks on it where it had been dragged with chains. And I'm telling you, there is no way to get heavy equipment in there, not without bulldozing a trail, and that would have been obvious. All of the trails in there are so completely overgrown. The park itself is completely overgrown.
Oh,
it's really hard to move in it.
Yeah, Roger's in the chat.
Hey, Roger. We found another one here on Table Rock Lake too, and we're starting to discover some of the other lakes have them as well. That for some reason, these fully functional campgrounds, the Army Corps of Engineers is shutting them down. And they're ones that have had sightings, and in the case of Joe Bald, confirmed missing persons associated with the campground. And I don't understand why they closed Joe Bald when there's another campground not 5 miles away that's busy year round. You know, it's at capacity all the time. It's called Ants Creek. Ants Creek is always busy, and it's just off the same peninsula as Joe Bald. I don't understand why they would close one, keep the other open, but there were missing people from the Joe Bald campground. But there's another one down farther down the lake, down by Shell Knob, Missouri. It's called Big Bay. And they have not explained why they shut that one off. They put a big steel gate across the entrance. You can't get in there. You can't get in there by vehicle. You can probably still get in there on foot. But I'm planning on another nighttime excursion with a boat and some folks that are armed to the teeth, and I want to go in and find out.
It's like LBL. There's several camping areas in there were shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And mysteriously, things were removed, and
I'd do a lot more in LBL if I was closer. It's still 6 hours away from me, so it's not like I can just pop over there for a weekend camping trip. That's a bit of a drive. But these abandoned campgrounds right here in the Ozarks, every one of them are within an hour's drive of me.
That's interesting. And just closed up, no rhyme or reason. Just
the Kimberling City, Missouri, tried to reopen Joe Bald multiple times, and each time the Army Corps of Engineers shut them down without warning. Said, nope, will not open it back up. And considering a half acre of land down on Table Rock Lake, because it's a tourist destination, it's a beautiful area. Half acre of land goes for about $200,000. Why did they cordon off? Well, in each case, Joe Bald's probably 150 acres. Combs Ferry's probably closer to 300. Big Bay is at least 200 acres. Why did they shut these down and won't even allow them to be developed?
Yeah, that especially not making any money on it. I mean, come on. Wow, that's obvious. Why.
That makes zero sense.
Yeah.
There's
They
places
know why.
around here I wonder about that.
Every once in a while, you'll see some gates closed that used to be open, and you can't get into areas anymore.
Check those areas where public access areas have suddenly been closed, or the campgrounds have been shut down without explanation, and especially if they're near a wildlife management area. Wildlife management areas seem to be hot spots.
Yeah.
Well, we got a place over here. We'll just call it the peninsula for.
Mm-hmm.
We have our reasons for that, but
Yeah, we have a lot. That's got a lot of. I haven't been over there yet. I've been there, but I haven't been there since our conversations about the place.
we've got a guy. We know a guy that researches over there, and as far as Bigfoot goes, that place is.
Yeah, you would never think it.
They're there. It's in a neighboring county. It's out on a peninsula. I mean, there's a dump, and then the town, and then there's
shooting
a
range in there.
Down from, and I
two
mean
campgrounds.
Yep.
That are not closed.
The state forest itself is 3,500. The park is 2,300. And, it's not open on the weekends, but the gates are never closed. So, at least at the state forest. But I've just from walking in there in the daytime, I've seen some interesting stuff in there.
Several
Old
casts have
basket
been.
weavings where they made like a nest
Yes.
that he found back in 2018, and you can still see the remnants of it.
And casts. Several
blue
footprint
balloons,
casts.
DA. There's find a lot of blue balloons in there.
Blue balloons.
Yeah.
Probably taken from the dump nearby and drug
But
over
it's
into there or
always the
something.
color blue, and they always find them like tied around something, or it's like they have some sort of
That's
interest
weird.
in that. And I've heard other people talk about blue.
Blue is one of the rarest colors in nature.
Yeah.
And even the Native Americans, when they started to be able to get blue beads, that was a big deal to them. So it could be something along those lines. It's just blue is such a rare color, they wanted it.
Yeah. I've heard other people talk about that, finding blue objects. It's odd.
Definitely.
You wouldn't think about it until you just find it in random places. Like he's found it. I've even found stuff over here. Just like blue plastic, and I actually found a blue balloon not that long ago.
Well, about 2 years ago, and I live in town. I don't live in the country anymore. I wish I still did, but we live in town, and we live in Springfield, Missouri, which is the third largest city in the state of Missouri. So it's not a small town. I started finding blue, like shiny blue stones around my front porch. And I'm like, what the hell? Where are these coming from? And I would find 2 or 3 a week. And I'd pick them up, and I've got a milk jug back here underneath my desk. If I could get to it, I'd show them to you. But I've got probably a double handful of these things that I've been collecting over the last couple of years. And it wasn't every day, just once or twice a week or a few times a month. I'd find these blue stones. And I'm like, what the hell are these? And they're like smooth, polished stones, like people would put in like a bird feeder or like really nice landscaping stuff. But there's none of that on my block. Anywhere near us. And I'm like, I kept asking my wife, I'm like, where the hell are these rocks coming from? And my youngest son, Noah, he's like, oh, I know where those are coming from. I'm like, where? He said, there are crows that live in our neighborhood, and I go out and give them bread every morning. He said, and every once in a while they bring me blue stones. I'm like, I'll be a son of a gun. So those crows are paying for their bread by bringing us blue stones. There's 3 or 4 out in the front right now. I haven't brought them in yet.
Wow. Never heard of that before. That's pretty cool. I'll be darned. I thought you was going to tell me you were marked.
I wouldn't be surprised considering some of the places I've been.
Well, I think I remember Greg House said that he's found stones sitting on the hood of his truck before.
Yeah.
Him and Coonbo both.
Yeah. Hell, Coonbo just has to show up at Greg's and one decides to walk across the road.
Greg was telling me about that. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
When Greg and I were talking one night, the night that happened, he said, "Hell, if Coonbo and I ever did go to Loch Ness, we'd end up hitting it with the boat."
Well, that's happened before.
Ugh.
Funny.
I
So,
wouldn't want to
okay,
hit one of those things under the water.
you're an award-winning author. Tell us about some of the books you write and what they're about.
Well, my first series was a zombie series, and it's called Ragnarok Rising, and it started as a joke between like me and 6 other cops. We were all bored, middle of the night, nothing going on, so we kind of windowed up in a little group to have coffee, and we got to talking about zombie movies, and I don't know why, it just started talking about zombie movies, and one of the guys goes, "Well, what would we do if that happened here?" And of course, I laughed at him. I'm like, "What do you mean zombies here in Springfield?" He goes, "No, seriously, what would we do?" Well, so we started talking hypothetically, like how we would, change emergency management plans to try to react to zombies and things we would do. And we were joking about it, but it stuck in my head. And then the next morning, when our shift was over, I was driving home. I was looking at buildings and stuff, and like, could we defend that? Could we barricade that? And I was looking at cars, thinking how we would bolt stuff over the windows to keep zombies out and stuff. And I couldn't quit thinking about it. So I got home, and the next day I was supposed to be off. So I usually just went straight to bed when I got home, but I couldn't sleep. And I sat down and I set out the notes that would become Ragnarok Rising. And a lot of the characters in that are based on those idiots that I had that conversation with. But I've always wanted to be a writer. Even when I was a kid, I used to write little short stories and stuff. And I wrote a lot of poetry growing up, and just always tried to stay involved as a writer. But after Ragnarok started gathering some success, I decided I wanted to tackle something that was a little closer to my heart. And that's when I released my first Apex Predator book. And Apex Predator is about a group of Native Americans. And I'm sure you guys have heard of the Cheyenne and Lakota dog soldiers.
Uh-huh.
Well, there's a belief that not only were those guys great warriors, but the most powerful among them could actually change shape. And that idea just intrigued me to the point I thought, well, what if there's a group of those dog soldiers left that are hunting dangerous cryptids? And that's what gave birth to that first Apex Predator book.
Apex Predator is a great book.
And that Apex Predator Wolf Moon kind of kicked it all off. And I really found that I not only enjoyed writing about cryptids, but it was just something that I was very passionate about in general. And I'd been doing research on it since I was a kid anyway. So I had thousands upon thousands of accounts that I could draw on for inspiration. I'd talked to dozens of eyewitnesses, had experiences of my own. And so I just started incorporating some of that into stories. And that's when, shortly after I first heard that story about the Navy SEAL team that went after a clan of Bigfoot in North Carolina, I don't know if that story's true or not, but it rings true. And it made me think maybe there's a military team out there that hunts these things. And that in a conversation with Josh Dalton and Steve Benrodis, me and Steve, over many a glass of whiskey, gave birth to the Wild Hunt series, and it just continued to grow from there. I mean, then I did Lakeview Man. There was a song by a band called the Rainmakers. They're a Missouri band. They're from up near Kansas City, and they had a song on their second album called The Lakeview Man. And the song is talking about an old legend about a soldier that came home from war and just didn't want to deal with it anymore, and went and lived in the woods. And people would occasionally see him, covered in hair, and stealing, food out of people's freezers and stuff. And they called him the Lakeview Man. But the more I listened to that song, the more it sounded almost like a Bigfoot story to me. So it gave me the inspiration for the Lakeview Man series. And it just continued to go from there. And, we got a conversation going, me, Doc, and Robbie one night, saying, well, if these cryptids have been around all this time, I wonder how they dealt with them back when they didn't have modern firearms, if they were getting attacked. And that's what gave me the idea for a group right after the Civil War having to deal with cryptids. And that's the Dark Frontiers series. So all all of the creatures and all the behaviors in those books are based on things I've researched, based on stories, accounts, tales that I've been told, Native American lore that I've researched. While the books are fiction, the sequences, the information in them is based on actual research.
Have you considered writing maybe sometime in the future, like a bona fide, of your findings aside from like your novels or your stuff you write there, but something on the subject,
Yeah, I have talked about doing some nonfiction. I want to do one that if I can. Well, I've been in talks with a guy that can do the artwork for me, and I want to do like a guide, like a field guide of different types of Bigfoot, like the Gugway, the swamp ape, and even ones from around the world, like the Alma, the Almasty, the Yowie, the Yaren. There are dozens and dozens of names for Bigfoot, and then list under the types other names like how well, for example, the Lakota refer to it as Shiyetanka, which means big elder brother. So that every tribe's got a different name for it, but I would break that down further to show which tribes referred to which ones and things like that. So yeah, I do have plans to do some nonfiction stuff and even probably some stuff based on my own research, things I've observed. But that's probably a project for the next couple of years. It's probably not something I'm going to get to anytime real soon.
Yeah, that would definitely be some good reading. You hear what you've experienced, especially with what we call here the Dwayyo, but the dog.
That's what they call Dogman in Maryland.
Yeah,
still trying to
really
figure
an
out
old name, yeah, Dwayyo. Yep, Dwayyo. Dwayyo.
I wonder what the origin of that is.
You're working on a couple books right now, aren't you?
I've got 3 going at the same time. I'm hoping to have one of them released in the next few weeks. Awesome. I've got the one called Heart of Iron. It's the first foray into a fantasy series. Then I've got, right on the heels of that, I've got another Lakeview Man book coming out. It's going to be called Lakeview Man Dead of Winter. And then I've got the second in the Nightmare Hunter series is going to come out. And after I finish at least one of those projects, I'll be starting Codename Wild Hunt Gray Lady Down.
I really love the Wild Hunt series.
Yeah, I got to look into those. Yeah.
I hope you like them.
I really like how you parlay everything. All of those books are connected.
I wanted to do something when I first started writing. I wanted to do something kind of like J.R.R. Tolkien. Tolkien's a fantastic writer. I love those books. I've probably read them a dozen times over the years. But if you look at The Hobbit all the way through the end of Lord of the Rings, it's really one big story. It's all interconnected. It's all one big story. And that's more universe building than it is just storytelling. And that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to build a universe where all these characters not only had their own adventures, but they also interacted. So you'll find in every series I write, characters from other series will show up and they affect each other's lives on a daily.
Yeah. I really enjoyed when you put Steve Lilly into the. That was a good one.
Cam's a good buddy of mine, and I was really thrilled to do a Steve Lilly story.
I'm dying to listen to another Cam Buckner Steve Lilly release here soon, hopefully.
I'm hoping he's got another one out pretty soon because I enjoy him too. When I was working overnights as an officer, man, I can't tell you how much Dixie Cryptid I listened to.
I think we all did at one time.
Yeah. That's how I used to fall asleep at night. Sometimes I still do.
Did you seriously use the word parlay, Jeff? You never cease to impress me show by show.
Did I do that? I don't know. It's all. I love how it's all interconnected. Like Ragnarok, you start reading all the books, and then you realize, hey, there's
references that connect to this.
Yeah.
And that was by design. I wanted to tell a much bigger story. You can read any of the series by themselves, and they're standalone. You'll get the whole story. You won't be lost.
What order you read it in either.
And if you read them as as a universe, if you read them all together, a lot of stuff's going to make a lot more sense.
Yep. Greg's right. Yeah.
I wish they would too. If I had any contacts in the movie industry, I would be like, hey, buddy, well, don't you look at these? Instead of remaking movies over and over and generally making them badly, why don't you do something new? I mean, there's a lot of books out there, and I'm not just speaking about mine. There are tons of great writers out there that Hollywood's never even touched.
Yeah, I don't understand why they don't try to like come up with some original content or something. It's
Well,
like they're
I got
running into
32 books. I think I could keep them busy for a while.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I'm sure you could keep them busy with that. I think I told you this, but the other night when I started reading Death of the Outlaw Pass, I stayed up till like 3 in the morning. Then I realized what time it was. I was like, shit, I'm glad I don't have to do the early shift today. And I went and slept for a couple hours.
See, to me, that's like the greatest compliment a writer can get. If you get so immersed in the story, you can't put it down. That's a
Yeah.
tremendously great compliment. That's exactly what you want to go for.
Yeah.
Thanks,
That's the
Greg.
problem with me. When I pick up a book like yours and I start reading into it, I'm like, I need to go to sleep, but I want to see what's happening next. And then I just keep going after it. It's hard to
I do that. I do that when I read certain authors. I mean, I know it's bedtime, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do one more chapter, and I'll get to the end of that. I'm like, yeah, I'll do one more chapter. Next thing I know, it's 4 o'clock in the morning.
6 hours later.
Wow.
Oh shit.
Like I should have went to bed like 5 hours ago.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, be a lot of coffee today.
Yeah. Mom's like, what's wrong with you? I said, I stayed up too late reading.
Now you fall asleep, Jeff. We got proof.
Oh, don't ask John Lamb. Well, Jerry was here too.
So I'll tell you what, real quick. What do you think they are, DA? What do you think the composition, I mean, or not composition, but where these things came from? What do you think they are? Are they flesh and blood? Are they something beyond that? Or
Well, I will preface my answer with this. There are no experts in this field. No matter what anybody tells you or tries to sell you, there are no experts in this field. Nobody has all the answers, and I certainly don't claim to. Now, I have my opinions, and I have my opinions that are based on my observations. So this is my opinion. It's not meant to upset anybody. I just, although I know there are lots of people that have had reports with what they refer to as the woo, I've never experienced anything like that. And being a cop for so many years, I'm very evidence based. I'm very physical evidence based. If I went to a crime scene as a cop and rolled up and the house was locked up tight, no way to in or out of the house, completely locked from the inside, and I can look through the window and see the guy has been shot, but there's no gun in his hand, there's no gun anywhere around, and we make entry and find out the guy was murdered, but there was no way that anybody could have gotten in and out of the house. If the first thing I said was, yep, portals, I'd be peeing in a cup the next morning. Not saying that to piss anybody off, but that's the fact of the matter. Yeah, there are a lot of steps to go through before maybe the killer had a key. Maybe they went out through a crawl space. There are lots of things you explore before you jump to portals and cloaking.
Yeah, maybe they teleported through the wall.
Yeah, exactly. They just teleported out. You can't just jump to that. And I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm just saying you've got to establish that these things are even real before you can start attributing supernatural abilities to them. And I think they're flesh and blood. I think they've been here a very long time. I think same thing with Dogman. I think in a lot of these cases, especially when we're dealing with, well, look at the Mammoth Cave system. Mammoth Cave runs from Maine to southern New Mexico. You don't think they can't use that vast of a network of caves to hide from us? I think these things use a lot of caves. If you look at the missing 411 cases, the big what they call clusters of disappearances. If you overlay that with a map of known cave systems, it's almost identical. So to think these things aren't using caves is you're being naive. They are definitely using caves, if for shelter, if nothing else. But I believe that they go deeper than we're able to go, because I used to be an amateur speleologist. I'm telling you, going miles deep in a cave is an undertaking. And if you're planning on going, and it's not like, you know what, we're going to go back in the Amazon rainforest and we're going to arrange for airplanes to drop supplies at these points. You can't do that in a cave. You have to go in, you have to pack everything in, go to your farthest point, establish a base camp, and then you go back and forth several times to supply the base camp. And then you go farther out, and you establish another camp, and then you ferry supplies to that, and then you have another team bringing more supplies back to that. It is a huge undertaking to go miles underground. So we've only scratched the surface of the Mammoth Cave system. We don't know how deep they go. We don't know how far they go. So, you know, and if you guys have heard some of the stories that Cam's had, and granted, sometimes you wonder if some of these stories are true, but it's not just Cam that I've heard these stories, that down in some of the deeper parts of the Mammoth Cave, 2 and 3 days in, they're finding backpacks and bones and pieces of old gear. There's no way a person just wandered in that far. One, they wouldn't have been able to see. Two, they wouldn't have had enough supplies to find their way in that far. So they're saying, how the hell did all these busted tents and bones and old backpacks get this deep into a cave? They just don't know. So I firmly believe that these cryptids are using these deep caves because they don't need to rely on the same senses that we rely on. I'm sure they're much better hearing, much better vision. And one of the theories that we came up with, and we've been talking about this on our show for the last couple of years, is that what a lot of people refer to as tree knocks may actually be tongue pops. And if I can turn off my noise filter, I'll see if I can do it for you. Let me give it a second. Let me shut it down. My noise filter will screen it out automatically. So let me shut my noise filter.
Can't hear you. We lost you. Still muted. Oops.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, there you go.
It automatically muted me when I turned off the filter. I had to go back in and change my settings. But now, if you're at the baseball game, you'll know it's my wife and son in the other room. I've got that filter so you don't hear them. But anyway, as a kid growing up on the farm, I would mimic bird calls. I would mimic sounds I heard out in the woods. And one that I would hear sometimes in the evenings was a clicking sound. And I wondered what it was. And, I tried all the gamut of noises trying to reproduce it, like popping your tongue, thing like that. I tried doing the, where you pop like that, and it just, nothing ever came close to the sound and the power. And I started practicing, and I know there are probably other people out there that can do this, but I don't know anybody that's able to duplicate this sound. And when I did it at the Bigfoot conference at Gatlinburg, the entire room went silent and turned and looked at me like, what the hell? I put my tongue on the roof of my mouth and I pop it.
Yep.
Can you hear that?
Yeah. I used to be able to do that. Yep.
I do that out in the woods with my hands cupped. You can hear it for a long ways. Well, me and Robbie and Doc and Steve, we were talking about it, my son Noah, and it made sense to us that, because sometimes you would do like a knock in the woods and you'd get an instant response. So unless Bigfoot was carrying a Louisville slugger around, where did it suddenly grab a tree branch to make that sound back? Because if you pick up deadfall in the woods and hit it against a tree, most of the time it just explodes because it's just rotten wood. So you need something that's a true hardwood to be able to duplicate that sound that quickly. So I don't think there was Bigfoot out there, like I said, walking around with a Louisville slugger, but to get that quick of response, and I would make a knock sound and get it back almost instantly, sometimes from more than one direction. So we get to thinking, maybe it's a tongue, and I've been able to do that, and we've demonstrated it for people, and then Robbie found a video that I'd seen before but completely forgotten about. There is a guy who completely blind since birth. He taught himself to ride a bicycle and navigate by clicking his tongue. He taught himself echolocation and was riding this bicycle through obstacle courses. So if a human born without the ability the ability to see can teach himself echolocation to navigate on a bicycle, you can bet these things are capable of learning it. And I think that tongue pop is used when they're below ground to find caverns.
That's a good observation. Yeah. I don't know what you are doing in chat with chickens, but you're starting to worry me. I know you've been keeping up with it there.
I'm trying. I can't.
I'm afraid to ask.
I can do that tongue pop pretty loud, and I'm not saying that's the every case. I don't think that's exclusively what they do. I'm sure they, some cases they beat their chest like a gorilla, or they thump the ground with their fist. Gorillas do that as well. Sometimes maybe it is a tree against a tree, but I think in some cases it's a tongue pop. And even now, like I said, we've been talking about this for about 2 years. One of the most recent posts from Steve Isdall, he was talking about one of his viewers wrote in and said they actually saw one put its hands up to its mouth and click its tongue.
Yeah, a bunch of us in school used to do that all the time. I got pretty good at it, but I can't do it anymore.
I've done it for years, but I've never been able to like, none of my kids can do it. My wife can't do it. Nobody I've grown up around could able to duplicate it. And to me, it's just as natural as as spitting or the tongue, that kind of thing, as it's just so easy for me to do. But it took me a long time to figure it out.
So if I start hearing it around here, I'm going to make sure it's not Jeff doing it first.
I can't do that kind of stuff. I can barely call a goose. I don't think I can. That's why when we always used to goose hunt, I was the one shooting, not calling.
If anybody's got any questions for DA, go ahead and put them in caps. We'll get them on here for you quick.
Now, DA, have you ever heard them try to mimic anything?
I've heard what they refer to as the 500-pound owl. One night when a bunch of us were at a deer camp out in the Mark Twain, we heard bird calls, but they weren't bird calls that were native to our area. We're like, what the hell kind of bird is that? And I would look it up later. And I'm like, that's not a bird that's normally around here. And birds don't generally call at night. And one particular time in the Mark Twain, we woke up the next morning get ready to go hunting, and there were 5 or 6 coyote skulls just set in a circle around our fire.
That's not strange at all.
Yeah, that's not weird at all. A couple of the guys were so weirded out they left deer camp and went home. I'm like, I'm still hunting.
I probably would have stayed too, DA.
Yeah, well, back then we hunted because that's what filled our freezer.
Exactly.
Like, we need the meat. So,
There's
hey, Robbie, what's up, brother?
Robbie's in.
Yeah, you need to keep a leash on Robbie.
Robbie works some crazy hours, so he's harder to nail down than Jello sometimes. The dude gets up at like 4:00 in the morning and sometimes doesn't get to bed till 2. I don't know how he does it. I'd be a dead man walking.
That kind of stuff, but I'm still in my 30s, so.
Well, Robbie's in his, I think he's in his late 40s or early 50s, and I'm in my mid 50s. So yeah, I don't recover from crap like that. Even coffee doesn't help after so long.
No. Not at all.
You can only do it so many times in a row, then you got to take a break for a few days. And
yeah, got to recharge the big gray Delco.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, sleep is a good thing nowadays, believe me. When you can get
I've heard blue heron mimics.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. It is farm over here.
Weirder than hearing a 500-pound blue heron.
Yeah, that'd be pretty bizarre.
I don't know if you've ever heard one of those, DA, but that is not a bird you generally hear at 4:00 in the morning, and there's not usually 3 of them.
Robbie and his friend, trying to think of his buddy's name. No, I just can't. Sorry, man. Rob, it's not coming to my mind. but he's Robbie's co-host on What's Really Out There, his podcast. But when they were in LBL, his buddy did an owl call, and he'd researched it before he got there. He deliberately did an owl call that was not indigenous to Western Tennessee. It was an East Coast owl. And not only did it answer back in the same call, it answered back immediately. And then it answered a second time. And then the third time, Robbie said it just went hoot like that. Johnny, Robbie said, his buddy Johnny. The third time it answered, it sounded like it was kind of pissed off about it. It just went hoot.
Well, you want to hear a good one. I was camping this year up in Western Maryland and up in Allegheny in a place called Greenridge, which I've heard other people talk about. And I found, indentions. I couldn't get a real good picture of it, but it definitely looked like a track. But the ground was so dry, but even then it still looked like something with, substantial weight. Next to my size 11, it made me look like a toy. So I heard something the one night we were in camp in hammocks, which, makes you feel real good about yourself when you start hearing weird stuff outside. Like a taco or something.
Yeah, but, you're the soft taco of the Sasquatch world.
Yeah, pretty much. And I'm laying in there, and Maryland is weird about people carrying handguns even during turkey hunting season. Even though there was a few of us that had them there, but I just had a can of bear spray in the hammock and a couple of extra sharp objects. I hear we're all facing different directions. I'm facing across the trail. The other two are hammocked out. We're all anchored from the same tree. In the middle of the night, I wake up and I got to pee. Well, as I'm trying to move around, I hadn't really started moving yet. I'm just listening to everything outside. I hear my buddy snoring over here. The other one really hadn't made any noise yet. And I hear every time he snores, I start hearing a snore directly across from me. And I'm like, what in the hell is that? And he'd do it again, and right across the trail, it did it again. And I'm just sitting there listening to this going, what in the... So then my mind flipped back to the mimics I'd heard before, and I was like, shit.
I think they're very good at mimicking sounds.
I got to get out of this hammock, regardless of what's going on. I really didn't feel like peeing myself inside, so I turned the light on. Well, as soon as I started moving around, it just stopped in the middle of mimicking and just cut off. So as soon as it did that, I turned the light on, shoved my head out the window, like looking right at where that spot was. It was hiding somewhere. But the next morning, I found two branches just like that, right where I heard it.
I don't know about y'all's area, but I've talked to a lot of researchers here in the Ozarks, and one of the things we're discovering is when we find stick formations, they almost always correspond to medicinal plants. Like, for example, when we were in Combs Ferry, we found a spruce tree that had the bark stripped up to about 15 feet.
Okay.
And spruce bark is great for a lot of ailments.
Yeah, can't remember if that was a spruce tree or what it was.
But
that trackway was right above the camp. Everything I noticed was right around the camp. I think they were just curious. Everything we've seemed to find around here has not really led to anything belligerent or anything like that we know of.
Well, you never know, though. I mean,
yeah.
I use bears as a great example.
Exactly.
People have encounters with bears all the time, and they're fine.
Yeah.
Bear go its way, you'll go. They'll go. The person will go theirs. That happened to me. I was hiking a trail up in the Rockies, and I kept telling the guys I was hiking with, I'm like, I hear a bear. They're like, I don't hear a bear. I'm like, I'm telling you, I'm hearing a bear. Well, we rounded a bend in the on the trail, and I came nose to nose with a grizzly bear, and it was a good size. I mean, I play this little game with my dog. He'll come up, look at me, and I'll go boop and pop him on the nose. I could have done that to that bear. It was that close. And the first thing I said was I froze. I said, don't run. And instantly what I heard was they left my ass alone there with that bear. And I'm like I said, I'm nose to nose with this bear. And it looked at me and I looked at it, and I guess it wasn't hungry, or fat guy just didn't seem to something on the menu that day, and it went its way and I went mine. But I can tell you that was a brown pants moment. But had that been that bear was getting ready to go into hibernation or just woke up, or if it had cubs, I'd have been a dead man. That was nothing I could have done. I couldn't have got away fast enough. I was too close. It could have taken my head off within an instant. But that's just a perfect example of how you can have a peaceful interaction with something and it still be violent. You might run into a Bigfoot 4 or 5 times and it ignore you, but you catch one in a bad mood, or somebody shot at it, or somebody tried to hit it with a car. You catch one in a pissed off mood, and they can certainly rip your arms and legs off without much effort. And you never know. I mean, are we on the menu for them? I'd say it's highly likely, depending on the circumstances. If game is scarce and they're needing to feed their family unit, I'd say long pigs on the menu.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
The only time I've ever really had what I would consider an aggressive was the time I got too close to that one and got screamed at in the dark, fixing a deer stand after hours. Not a fun adventure when 2 of us are scrambling back to a tractor with a dim ass flashlight. And then you see a John Deere going airborne at 9:30 at night across a cornfield.
Yeah.
Anthony Coker's right. It's why you hike with a 22. Won't stop the bear, but you wound your buddy to get away. Can sure kneecap the guy with you. Important safety fact. Always hike with somebody you can outrun.
That's right. Yep. That's awesome. Man, great stories. Really appreciate you having, being able to come on here with us. And, be
My
interesting
pleasure,
to hear
I'm
some
having
more.
a good time. Like, any other reason I tell you, I got a million of them because I've collected them from all over the place.
Yeah, also, you've got some ghosts.
I've had some paranormal encounters from when I was a cop. There's an old hospital here in town. It's the North Campus of Cox Hospital. The only thing really there now is an emergency room, a school, and a couple of psych wards. Most of the hospital isn't even used anymore, but it's really old. It was originally called Burge Hospital, and it was built sometime in the late 1800s. Yeah. So most of that building is in pretty rough shape. They built the new hospital out on the south side of town, and that's the one they primarily use. But that old North Campus is still there. When I worked overnight security for them, I patrolled that hospital. And one time I was walking on the ground floor in part of the building they use as offices, and that's where the old chapel's at. And as I walk down the corridor toward the chapel, I can see off to my left into the chapel. It's a little side hallway, but there's no exit. There's no way for anybody to come in or out without coming out that hallway. It's only one way into the chapel. And as I'm approaching the chapel, I just glanced over, and in the back row of this chapel, there was an old man in a dark colored suit with his head bowed. I could see him plain as day. I mean, there was enough just not, security lighting, not the full lighting, but just like the random lights they had at irregular intervals just for security. I could see him clear in that. And I stopped, and then I turned and went down that hallway to go into the chapel. And I was going to tell him, hey man, this whole area is closed. You're not supposed to be in there. But when I walked into the actual chapel, he was gone. So I searched the chapel. I checked everything. I looked up underneath the pulpit. I looked in the closets. Nobody. And there's no way he got out without walking past me. So I'm a little freaked out about that. So I go back down to the lobby And as I'm getting ready to walk out, I turn and look, and on the wall of the lobby is this giant painting of Lester Cox, the guy that founded the hospital, and it was the guy I'd seen in that pew.
Oh.
And he'd been dead for a long time.
Oh.
I was
I'm
like,
not much on ghost stuff.
yeah,
that's things that make you go, yeah.
I've seen some weird crap. One night when I was working at the South Campus, the 6th floor of the hospital is all machinery, like air handling equipment and backup generators and stuff like that. It's all machinery. And after hours, no one's on that floor, even maintenance. And the only way to get in and out of that floor is you've got to swipe in with an identity card. And once a night on my patrols, I would walk through that floor just to make sure nobody was in there when they weren't supposed to be. Or we also had a lot of problems at the hospital with homeless people sneaking into the hospital. So we would walk all the stairwells and all the floors just to make sure that nobody that wasn't supposed to be in there was in there. So I walked onto the 6th floor one night and saw a dark shadow of a person walk between two of the pieces of equipment. And I immediately called out. I'm like, "Hey, who's back there?" And I started going after them. And I could catch them like moving around another piece of equipment. And I chased them for probably 15, 20 minutes. And they finally ducked in the section where there's elevator access, but the elevators can only be opened with one of those ID cards. None of the elevators were moving. None of them were open, and none of them were even on that floor. But I never found that shadow figure. And I chased it for 15, 20 minutes.
Mm.
And then I went down to the security office and checked, and the only person in the last 5 hours that had swiped in and out of that floor was me.
Damn.
Creepy.
There's some weird crap in hospitals.
Oh yeah. And churches.
Mm-hmm. They're just creepy when they're shut down or when there's nobody there.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories across the world, really, with shut down hospitals or places.
Well, considering the number of people that die in hospitals every year, it's no wonder that even something negative could attach itself to a hospital. It could be the spirits of the people who have departed. It could be something worse that came looking for those spirits. And I've had a few moments where I was like, yeah, maybe I ought to be somewhere else right now, where I knew it wasn't a person. And my idea was, I can stand here and, try to go toe to toe with something that obviously isn't part of this world, or I can get the hell out of here. Well, would you look at the time?
Yeah, as well. Elaine said old folks' homes as well, nursing homes and stuff. Yeah.
Now, I don't think Gary and I ever talked about this, but I wanted to ask DA, because I always wondered about it, and you were one of the first ones that ever brought it up. The Roosevelt connection.
Well, that's something that we've really dug into.
We'll enjoy this, Jerry.
In the late 1800s, before Teddy Roosevelt was president, he wrote a book called The Wilderness Hunter. The Wilderness Hunter is still available. You can buy it on Amazon. I've got a copy on the shelf behind my green screen. It's a fantastic book. It talks about the places he traveled and hunted and things he did while traveling the American West. But one story really stands out because it's the first incident that I ever read of a Bigfoot killing someone. It's called the Bauman incident. Now, in the story, Bauman is never given a first name. Bauman is never spoken of again after the story, and nobody ever came forward and claimed to be Bauman. The level of detail in that story, it tells me that the person writing the story was there. That's not the level of detail I've ever coaxed out of an eyewitness. The level of detail in that story leads me to believe that Teddy had been there. I think Teddy was Bauman. I think his partner was killed, and he didn't want to get suspicion cast upon him, and he still had political aspirations. He didn't want to say some big monster out in the mountains killed my partner. So if you can accept that little premise, and I can even sweeten that a little bit, if to show that Teddy, I believe Teddy is Bauman. When Teddy attended, he was an Ivy League college, I believe it was Harvard. When Teddy attended, college, he was part of the competitive sculling team, the long, slender boats that they row. Teddy was the front man of that boat team. Do you know what the front man of that team is called? A bowman.
Bowman. Yep.
So it's not a huge leap of the imagination to think that Bowman in the story, the Bowman incident, was Teddy. I firmly believe it was. And there are other incidents where Teddy has had cryptid-related dealings, but we'll get to that. But flash forward, what's one of the first things that Teddy Roosevelt does when he becomes president?
National Park.
He created the National Park Service, which today is over 88 million acres that we still don't have full access to.
Yeah.
As a citizen, you can't even fly a drone over a national park. They will shoot it out of the sky. You are not allowed to go in restricted areas of these parks. You can't fly a drone over it, not without huge clearances, and then you have to fly in a very specific area. If you deviate, they will take that drone down out of the sky. They will not let you do anything like that. Why is that? I think they're protecting something. I think they're protecting the habitat of these creatures, and Teddy knew about it. Teddy was big into conservation. So another thing that should cast suspicion on Teddy's involvement with cryptids is when Teddy was leading his Rough Riders up San Juan Hill. He met a guy, and I cannot off the top of my head remember the guy's name. I could look it up, but he met a guy who was from Arkansas, and the guy told Teddy the story of the Ozark Howler. And if you're not familiar with the Ozark Howler, it's an Ozarks folklore about a creature the size of a bear that looks like a dog and has horns coming out of its head. You can hear it scream across the mountains and valleys of the Ozarks. Still sightings of it today. There was a sighting just a few years ago, just by Rolla, Missouri. Well, supposedly Daniel Boone killed one, and had it stuffed and was part of his collection that went to the Smithsonian when he died. But now you can't find it. No such collection exists, according to the Smithsonian. But this guy from Arkansas knew about the Ozark Howler, and he told Teddy about it. And Teddy became so engrossed in the idea of the Howler, he actually set aside the Ozark National Forest, which is about 2 million acres, specifically as a preserve for the Ozark Howler. Teddy went on to join a group called the Concatenated Order of the Hoo-Hoo. The Hoo-Hoo is an Ozarks name for the Howler. A lot of people have called that for generations. There is a secret society called the Concatenated Order of the Hoo-Hoo. You can look them up. The only members of the Concatenated Order of the Hoo-Hoo are in the forest industry. And it's by invitation only. You can't just join it. You've got to work in the forest industry. Now, Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson both served as president of the Concatenated Order. Think they don't believe in cryptids?
Right. Yeah, that's good.
What do you think about that one, Jerry?
I've heard that. It might have been him. I heard say it previously.
Yeah.
Well, we've been talking it for a while.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm the first one to come up with the idea, but I've certainly researched it.
Yeah.
Elaine Schapp says, she was saying, do you think he created the parks to keep the environment that these things live in safe from us encroaching? I think so. But then you look at the missing 411 and see just how many people go missing in these national parks, missing under suspicious circumstances. The connected line is pretty much drawing itself.
Yeah. He knew what was there.
Exactly.
Oh yeah.
Because I've heard a lot of stories, supposed to be fictional accounts of him killing Bigfoot. So,
the man hunted everything.
Is that really? I mean,
I would not be surprised if he did. That man was all about conservation, about preserving the animals for future generations, but he was also an avid hunter. He hunted in Africa. He hunted all over North America. He hunted in the Amazon. The guy was a dedicated hunter. So if anybody brought one down, it's probably him. But even now, when giant bones are discovered, like the bones they found in Lovelock Cave. Whenever those are dug up today, like in the case at Lovelock Cave, the giant red-haired giants that the natives fought, when they found the bones in Lovelock Cave, they actually put them on display in the museum in Lovelock, Nevada. After they'd been there for several years, the Smithsonian approached them so they could study the bones. Lovelock signed the bones out to the Smithsonian, and they vanished. The Smithsonian says they never received them, even though the Lovelock Museum still has the receipt from the Smithsonian. Smithsonian says they don't have them, and every time giant bones are discovered, that's what happens. The Smithsonian gets a hold of them, and they're gone.
I've heard that too. I've heard that.
If you look at the journals of Lewis and Clark, they talked about giant hairy Indians.
Mm-hmm.
The Vinland colony with the Vikings, they encountered what they referred to as the Skraelings, and the Vikings were known to be, big bearded, powerful warriors, known to be very large for the day, and they described these as being huge, hairy monsters, and that's why they left Vinland.
Oh yeah, there's a few places around here I wonder about, like Bainbridge, like you and I talked about, DA. I wish I knew more about that place.
Well, then you've got other documented places like Port Locke and Port Chatham, Alaska, that were abandoned because of attacks.
Yeah. Well, I want to know why there's an abandoned naval base sitting on top of a bluff overlooking the river. That's what
I'd like to know that myself.
And why it hasn't hardly been used since the 1950s. And if you ever know anybody that happens to know anything about that place,
well, I'm still digging. If I find anything good, I'll share it with you. But I'm still digging. I'm constantly researching topics.
Yeah. Now you guys have done shows about weird stuff at Edgewood, haven't you? The genetic testing. I remember Doc talking about that.
I don't think we did any specifically about that, but I think we have discussed it during other conversations.
Yeah. There's always been weird stuff around Edgewood Arsenal.
There's a lot of weird stuff going on all over the place. I mean, look at the cattle mutilations that happened in Meeker, Colorado just a little over a year ago. They shut that up quick when they found large bipedal canid tracks and DNA that came back to no known canine species. In this day and age, when they've cataloged every canine species on the planet, it doesn't come back related to anything. Come on.
So quickly, right. Barely anybody heard about it.
Right. It got shut up pretty fast, and that's not far from where Doc lives.
Yeah. Now I understand why Doc goes upstairs with the Colt every time he hears something.
Yeah, if he hears a noise, he goes armed, and I don't blame him. I mean, they've had cattle mutilations. There was a Wendigo sighting not far from where he lives in Pikes Peak.
Lord.
Yeah, Wendigo. That's another subject. Yeah.
Oh.
Tell us some more, DA.
You're itching.
Tell us some more.
I got a pale crawler report.
Really?
Across the river. Yeah. Not far from here.
Yeah. Yeah, not far at all.
I'm wondering if what people think are pale crawlers are actually Wendigo, because if you look at the actual Native American lore, they don't describe Wendigo as having, a deer skull or antlers. That's stuff I use in my books to be creepy, and those were used on video games and TV shows. The true Wendigo just looks like a gaunt, emaciated, gray-skinned human, which is very much what a pale crawler or a rake are described as.
Well, that's what the guy saw this come across the road before it climbed over the guardrail going down the embankment. It came out of a reservoir, and it came over a fence. So it like shielded itself, and he said it was just pale white. And then it disappeared over the guardrail. And I've driven through there a lot hauling cows, and it's that is a drop off. What I mean, it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yes. I refer to it as the Great Divide. And And there's also, I got some recent activity reports from down there, Bigfoot related. So, and that's
That's a good
across the
spot
river
for
in
it.
Pennsylvania.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Not
it,
just
it
across
seems
the
like the
bridge.
territory of some of these creatures overlap.
Yeah. It's interesting.
The
And there's,
Wendigo, I don't really think is a cryptid. I think it's more of a nature spirit, like a corrupted
Yeah.
nature spirit, because it's there's so much supernatural elements to the Wendigo, and they're next to impossible to kill. They're absolutely horrifying. I mean, the original curse is that somebody dined on human flesh and are cursed to become the Wendigo, but that's not the only way you can become one. Pure, people who are just absolutely terribly greedy when other people are in need, they can be cursed as a Wendigo. When you can be possessed by the spirit of a Wendigo. There was a guy on a bus in the Trans-Canada Highway, like I want to say in the late 90s. He they have what they call Wendigo psychosis. The guy just snapped on a bus and killed the guy in the seat across from him and started eating him. And when the Canadians finally captured the guy, he had Ziploc bags of the guy's flesh that he'd stripped off and put in his pockets. He was treated and put in a mental asylum, and I believe he's out now.
Keep the Canadians up there. We don't need them bringing any of that stuff down.
Yeah.
There's even talks of, I've even heard a report, Skinwalker in Lancaster. I don't know how recent it was, but
generally the Skinwalkers stay pretty close to Navajo territory. So whatever they saw may have been similar, but it's probably not a true Navajo, but a true Skinwalker, because they stay pretty close to the D.A people.
Well, the Susquehannocks were the tribe down along the river.
Mm-hmm.
None of them around here anymore, but
yeah.
Are there even any, Jerry, do you know if there's any like Indian reservations or any like tribes that are still in the state? There's,
And this,
I mean,
not
I'm
that I'm
sure
aware of.
It wouldn't surprise me because there are a lot more reservations than people realize.
Yeah, I don't know where they were. I know there's
some
some in Maryland, but I just don't know.
Yeah, they're in Maryland, but I don't know about reservations. I know there's a tribe. I forget the name of the tribe in the Virginia, D.C., just outside of D.C. area. In the Virginia area.
Well, there was that one researcher out near West that was operating out near Western Maryland.
Yes.
Dave Thundercloud, but
Thundercloud,
no one's been able to find him.
He's still around here.
I think he's
here.
Yeah. I think Mikey said he talked to him a couple times.
Mm-hmm. He did. He did mention that he had conversations with him a couple times. Yeah. Yeah.
And Mary used to talk to him, but she hasn't heard anything from him in a while, so I don't know.
I don't know. I just read something about him not too long ago. Somebody was talking to him about the Bigfoot subject, and that was within the last year and a half. So, but that was in fact in Western Maryland. So.
Yeah.
You might reach out to William Nighthawk. I think he's in Virginia, but that's not too far from y'all.
Yeah, he's been on your show before, hasn't he?
Yeah, he's a fountain of information. He's Lakota. He's a Lakota medicine man. He's got a lot of great information.
Yeah, that would definitely be.
Yeah.
I always wanted to get a native's perspective on that.
Well, he's a great source. He'll be happy to share with you. I guarantee you. He's a really good dude, and he's got a lot of great information.
Let's check on that, Jeff. Yep.
Yeah, we got to look into
good.
that. Yeah, Jerry and I, we kind of got into this completely by accident.
Well, the subject has always been a part of my life, since I was a young kid. Since I was a young kid, seeing one, and then recent stuff here, within the year 2020, with the vocalizations, I Shine, and it's always been in the back of my mind. But just recently, I really started trying to
And then
learn more. Just listen and
yeah,
learn.
and then the
you know.
weird stuff that's happened over
Not
here.
that anybody's an expert, but still
Yeah.
listen and learn.
That's
And
all any
you
of
and
us are
I-
trying to do
Yeah.
is learn as
You and
much
I
as
are
we
right
can.
here. We're what, 5 miles apart?
Yeah, we're 5 miles apart. And it's, his story, what happened here and other parts of the county. Like I said, when he did some digging and found out that Harford County in the state of Maryland had the most incidences reported. Was it 93 or something, or maybe more than that? That was in that one journal.
97, I think.
97. So, but
And that's just what the one guy had recorded.
Mhm.
So,
but I am sure you get out into the mountainous part of the state, there's probably many untold stories.
well,
I think there are far more stories that we don't know. People who just didn't want to come forward for fear of being made fun of, or they just didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, I gave up on that. I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care what people think.
And I'm pretty sure years ago that the one apparition I thought I saw could have been a Bigfoot. There's a lot of things that I've been putting together.
Wife just opened the office door here and give me a heart attack. What is it? What is that? Excuse me. I'll be right back.
This is Spider.
Okay. Hold on. Be right back.
He was walking across the kitchen floor. He's freaking huge. Go open that up.
I don't blame her. I've ran into spiders out in the woods that were so big, I just shot them.
He didn't even have time to turn the mic off.
Yeah, I've ran into a few spiders out swung between trees and just looked at it and went, nope.
Yeah, I've done that with a 22 a couple times. I've shot them off the front of the porch.
I've seen spiders on my front and back porch both.
Yeah.
That if you had one of those bug assault guns, all you do is just raise the sodium level.
Well, the stainless, some of the stainless stuff we use in the barn, around the dairy, if I catch one somewhere and it's isolated and I can't burn anything, I get the little propane torch out.
Kill it with fire. I don't blame you, man. I hate spiders. I'd rather deal with snakes than spiders.
Turn it on until you hear it pop, and then you know it's done.
Listen for the popping sound.
I wish
Satisfaction guaranteed.
Phyllis, I wish I had a bug assault.
Doc's got one. I know the bugs we get around here are so damn big. I'm afraid to just piss it off.
That's when you just put 22 bird shot in your pistol and
Never a dull moment.
did you kill it?
The Spider Slayer returns.
Oh, you heard it's a spider. It's a spider.
Yeah, we heard all that. We were just talking about killing spiders while you were gone.
Shame on me.
I said I don't blame her a bit. I've encountered a few spiders in my time out in the woods that were so dang big I just shot them instead of messing with them.
Did you kill the spider, Terry?
What's that?
Well, I didn't hear gunfire.
Did you kill the spider, Terry?
Gunfire wasn't required. But anyway, crazy stuff. Scared me more as her opening the door. Wasn't expecting that. We're talking about freaking Bigfoot and everything else, and creak, open the door.
See, this is what I told you guys. I'm glad my bathroom I usually use is in the middle of the house.
Yeah, big old spiders. Yeah, we get some big spiders every now and then. This one wasn't that big, but big enough to scare her. It's all
My
good.
wife will make me drop what I'm doing and kill a spider that's almost so small you can barely even see it.
Okay, then you understand.
Yeah. Like, honey, that's not a spider, that's a speck. Oh, it moved. All right, I'll kill it.
Oh well.
DA, have you gotten any recent reports of anything near you, or has it been? I remember you said something about that deer getting snatched from in front of the patrol car.
Yeah, that's a one that I had some follow up on here just not too long ago. I talked to a friend of a friend kind of thing as an officer. He's still active and didn't want his name mentioned. But working rural patrol, we would occasionally get calls where there was a downed animal on the road. And a lot of times it was where a car or a truck had hit a deer and would just keep going. The deer would be laying in the road, sometimes still alive. But a lot of times, since animal control didn't work in the middle of the night, they'd just send us out to get it out of the road. Well, this guy got one of those calls. So someone had reported they'd hit a deer. Their car was fine, but they were pretty sure it was still alive. And it wasn't far away. And it's a, I don't want to say which county it is because I don't want to call this old dude out. But it's near me, but it's not a county that borders my county. But I've been there quite a bit. So anyway, he goes out. It's a little 2-lane blacktop with not much shoulder to speak of, and ditches on both sides because it's in the Mark Twain. And that's not giving anything away because Mark Twain covers a big chunk of the state.
Right.
But anyway, he goes out there and turns on his emergency light so people won't run into him. And he sees this deer and trying to get up. It looked like it was back was broken or its legs were broken, but it was laying there bleeding, not just bleeding, but bleeding, making noise, calling out, trying to get up. It was a little doe. And so he got out and he goes toward it. And his plan was he was just going to shoot it and put it out of its misery. So he calls it in, says, I've got a deer out here. And then here in Missouri, I don't know if they do that where you guys are from, but if we've got an animal that's still alive and it's not like too badly rotor-braided, we'll call in and they'll tell us you can take it to this food locker and they'll butcher it and give the meat out to needy people. That happens all the time.
That works up here anymore.
Yeah, it happens all the time here in Missouri. They'll still test it for chronic wasting disease, but so it doesn't go to waste, we'll take it to like Ozarks Food Harvest or the local one of the local pantries, and that was what his intention was to do. And he was calling it in, and he heard a boom behind him, and he turned around, and one of the back windows of his squad car had been busted, just exploded. So he goes running over there, drew his weapon, and there was nobody over there, but obviously something had hit the window. It was shattered inward, not outward. And there was nobody in his car but him. So he's looking around, he's shining his light around the trees, and he's trying to figure out what happened to his car. And he turns back around and looks at the road, and the deer is gone. He said, something distracted me to get that deer. He said, and he found a rock in his back seat also. But I asked him about it, and I said, so do you think it was a Bigfoot or a dog man? He goes, I don't know. I never saw what it was. He said, but it was smart enough to distract me so it could grab that deer and get out of the road with it. He said, well, I was pointing my pistol around and waving my flashlight around trying to figure out what had hit my car. He said, he grabbed that deer and it was just gone. So kind of revisited that with him here not too long ago, shot him an email, gave him a call. And he said, well, the toughest part about it was explaining why my back window got busted out. And he said, but it really wasn't that big a deal. He said, I didn't mention anything about something taking that deer. He said, but the weirdest thing is, he said, I went back out there with a buddy of mine. He said, he wanted to see where it happened. It was at nighttime when we were on our own car. He said, so we went back out there. He said, when I showed him right where it was, we got out of the car. He said, we're both armed. He said, the woods went absolutely just dead quiet. He said you couldn't hear a bug, a cricket chirp, nothing. Everything went dead quiet. He goes, we just had the weirdest feeling that something was watching us. I said, what'd you do? He goes, well, we got back in the car. We got the hell out of there. And I'm not planning on going back out there anytime soon.
I've had that happen a few times.
I've had the woods go dead quiet on me a few times, and that is a butt puckering moment.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, why?
It's not fun when you're sitting there and everything just shuts off.
Yeah, that is a very awakening moment. You're like, maybe I shouldn't be here.
That's when you prop the rifle up on the railing and flip the safety off.
Yeah, that's when Mr. Pew Pew goes from safe to semi.
Yeah, exactly.
I get out the long gun and the green tips.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
Robbie's right. That's how it was for us and Joe Bald. When we were in Joe Bald that night, we took Robbie down there last November, was it, Robbie? I know it was cold. We had that feeling from the moment we got there that something was watching us. Had the eye shine got close to us, but it never came out where we could actually see it. And I'm pretty sure it was trying to lure us away from the car.
yeah.
And at one point we had to. That's why my son Noah has now earned the official title. He's the official Robbie Wrangler whenever we go out on an outing, because we had to. I'm like, Noah, you need to get Robbie back here. He's taken off, so he had to wrangle Robbie back to where we were at, because he was heading off into the woods. I'm like, dude, I don't think if you go after that, I don't think you're coming back.
You know, like I've heard Robbie say before, if Jason Voorhees stepped out of the woods, I wouldn't be surprised. I've felt like that a couple times when I've been out hunting.
There are times when you can go down to Joe Bald, like if you go in the middle of summer, even at night, it's just you hear night bugs and looks like a good place to fish. But then there are other times of the year when you're driving down through there before you've even gotten out of the car, you're like, I don't know if I should be here tonight.
Yeah.
The willies.
You just feel it.
Uh-huh. It's hard to explain to anybody that hasn't had it happen to them. It's like everything shuts off.
He said the Jason Voorhees feeling was at Demumber's Bay in LBL. Yeah. And him and Johnny both were like, it wouldn't surprise me a bit to see a dude with a machete and a hockey mask come stepping out. Demumber's Bay is a creepy place. It is very creepy.
Yeah, I don't know if I've really been to anything around here yet that has given me the absolute, I gotta get out of this area.
I can take you a few places here in Missouri that would probably make you feel that way.
There's been times around here, like I've felt like even on the back of the property and like some of the lease ground, certain times of the year, it just feels wrong. Or you might be fine for a few months, and then you go there and it's like, what the hell? And then you're like, oh, I'm going to a different spot.
Have you read the short story I wrote about the dogmen in Moon Valley?
No, I haven't got to that one yet.
Okay. Well, that area is really creepy. And there's been sightings in Moon Valley. It's down in Dallas County, Missouri. And it's about 50, 60 miles from here. Maybe not quite that much, but pretty close. And it's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it is in the middle of nowhere. And there's lots of weird sightings down there, ghost stories coming out of Moon Valley. There was even back in 2019, there were 2 people arrested that lived just above Moon Valley for cannibalism. So this weird crap has gone on down in Moon Valley. But I went down there by myself one night just to kind of listen. And yeah, Robbie says Moon Valley's hella creepy. He ain't wrong. But I drove down there. I usually go with my son Noah, but I think he was out with his buddies that night or something. And so I felt like going for a drive, and I told Annette where I was going. She goes, well, make sure you call me when you're leaving. I want to know you're okay.
Yeah, I said, okay. I'm guilty of doing that sometimes.
I've done it too many times.
I try to get too far from the vehicle.
Yeah, I try to stay pretty close to the vehicle. But I go down to Moon Valley, and it's right at dusk. Night's coming on, but it's not quite there. Sun's actually below the edge of the valley, but there's still enough light to see by. And I'm walking around in a little parking area, and right in the area where in my short story, the patrol deputy gets into it with one of the dogmen, I look down and I start finding expended 9mm casings, a bunch of them. And I'm not talking like a mag or 2. I'm talking a couple hundred rounds. There's a lot of expended rounds down here. And I'm looking around and I'm looking at the trees, and there's a sign that says, welcome to Moon Valley, part of the Missouri State Park System. There are no bullet holes in the sign. There are no bullet holes in the trees. There are no bullet holes in any of the stuff in the parking area. I can't find a single bullet hole in any of the trees. I walked the whole perimeter. And I'm like, what the hell were they shooting at? Unless somebody dumped a couple hundred rounds into the river, I don't know what the hell they were shooting at, but I know there was a lot of brass. And I'm like, you know what? maybe this is a good time to go. I started getting a pretty uneasy feeling as I was carrying a 9mm and I had probably 50 or 60 rounds on me, and I didn't want to just add my brass to the pile. And I picked up some of the brass, and you could still smell the cordite. I mean, it was not that long ago that it had been fired.
It hadn't been
hasn't,
that long.
Yeah, it hadn't been there very long, and I could not find what they were shooting at. It wasn't like there was a bunch of broken bottles that they shot at. There wasn't anything like that laying around. The big wooden park sign is right there. No, not a single hole in it. It was in fine condition. No. Nothing in the trees. I don't know what they were shooting at, but they shot a lot.
Sounds like a major panic moment.
Somebody was unloading a lot of ammo.
If you're unloading a couple hundred rounds of 9mm, that's
especially with what it costs these days.
that's not target shooting.
That's crazy.
That's a lot of brass.
Yeah, I thought about picking it up, but I knew one of two things was part of that was a bad idea. One, yes, I know the brass is good to have, and I could have taken it to my buddy and got it reloaded because I've got a buddy that has a gun shop. But I would have had to have taken my eyes off my surroundings, and I had to have gotten down on the ground to sit there and pick up all that brass. Both things I wasn't going to do alone. Last thing I wanted was my attention on the brass when something was sneaking up on me.
Right.
Good Lord.
Yeah. Good advice.
Yeah, it was a lot of brass.
Creepy. Yeah, that's something bad.
A lot of caves in that valley too, by the way.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if you probably, like you said, you left, you didn't stick around to look and see what might have been shot at.
Yeah.
Any evidence on the ground.
Craziest things I think you ever posted was that middle cave entrance
with the bars on it.
Yeah,
I can't tell you why they barred off that cave.
Why
and if it was just to keep people out because of the endangered brown bat, like they talked about, you could have done that with a chain link fence. It's not like there was a river coming out of that would wash that chain link. They could have set some chain link posts down in concrete, attached it to the mouth of the cave, and no person could get in there without crawling over the razor wire.
Jerry, this thing looks like they built it to keep King Kong in.
Yeah, it's the mouth of the cave. You could drive a semi into the mouth of that cave.
There's an opening big enough for something to climb over the top of it, which doesn't make any sense to me.
Now, the bars they have put in are square, and they're about like this. They're about 4-inch square. It's about 25 feet high and spans the entire width of the cave. And it's even got things that lean over toward the outside.
It's got a gap, but there's a very substantial gap in that ceiling.
Yeah, there's still about another 10 to 15 feet above it where
it's open.
Someone, where it's open.
And
if you're just keeping people out, that's overkill. Oh, and that was not cheap to install.
They were keeping more than people out of there.
Right.
How big is that gate, DA?
That's probably easily 25 to 30 feet tall and 60 feet across.
Yeah. But then they got that big ass door there.
They've got a locked door in it.
Yeah, a big door.
Yeah, it's not like a little door you would open where people could step through. It was wide enough to put like large containers through.
And then they condemned that ground.
Yeah, that land out there used to belong to the Smittle family. And back when I was in high school, I was an amateur caver. We went out to get permission to go in their cave, and I actually got to talk to the people that own that farm. And they were in a legal battle with the state of Missouri. And the state of Missouri was trying to take their land, and they'd been farming that land for generations. And they're like, "No, we're not giving you the land." And it finally went to a head in court, and I never heard the official outcome. I just know the next time I went back out there, the land was shut down. You couldn't get in there, and the family was gone. But if you look at the Missouri Department of Conservation's website about Smittle Cave, the official story is the Smittle family, out of the goodness of their heart, donated the land to preserve the brown cave bat. And I'm telling you, that gate ain't there to protect bats. It's to keep something quite large contained.
Yeah, that's overkill.
Yeah, and we don't know how far back that cave goes.
Something out.
It goes. It's the 5th largest cave in the state of Missouri. It goes back miles.
Yeah. It's meant to keep us out and let something else come and go, is what it's.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't build something that big and then leave that much of a gap up top for bats.
Yeah, it's massive. And the engineering alone, I mean, that had to cost a lot of money to install that. It would have been, if you're just keeping people out, it would have been much cheaper to run some chain link and fence it off.
Yeah.
But they didn't do that. They put something that, like he said, looked like it's there to keep King Kong.
When you see pictures of it, Jerry, you're going to be like, what in the...
Yeah, I want to check that out. That's, yeah.
It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen. Have you seen it anywhere else, DA, or just there?
I've heard of other places that have had, caves shut down in similar fashion, but that's the only one I've actually got pictures of.
Even when they did Kumbo's place, they didn't even put something that big up for the cave bat.
That's crazy.
Yeah, the endangered bats. What is Greg saying about
that chat's been quite interesting tonight.
Oh, Lord.
Hey, Jeff.
Yeah.
I'm gonna send you that image,
All right.
and you can send it over to him.
All right.
There you go. And there's a person in the picture for scale.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. Check that out. You know how to send that over, right, Jeff?
Yes.
I haven't picked on you all night. Come on.
I swear, it is one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, DA. I don't
sure it is.
know how to explain that.
It's different. It's one of those things you look at it when you see it in person
It should
and
be on
see
your
the
phone
size of
right
it. You're like, what is that even for?
Yeah. I think we know what it's for, but
There are 3 other caves in that area that I haven't been to yet. But as soon as the bugs have died down and the temperatures have dropped a little bit, I don't really want to, because they've spotted the Lone Star tick in Missouri now, and that's the one that makes you allergic to beef.
Ugh.
And I don't know, no, thank you. I like me a steak and a burger, so I don't want that. So when we get the weather starting to turn a little chilly, and I'm gonna spray some DEET pretty good and put on my gaiters, and me and my youngest son Noah, we're going to go back out to Smiddle, and we're going to find all of those caves. We'll spend some time out there. We're hoping that if we can, there's something we've been wanting to do on our channel. We're trying to build a rig that will allow us to go live from remote locations like that.
Yeah.
And it's going to be a little pricey to build it. I know what I need to build. I worked comms when I was in the Army, so I know a little bit about it. But we're going to build our own portable rig that will allow us to have enough signal strength where we can go live from these locations. And Smiddle Cave is one of those places where we plan on going live from.
Jared, did you get
And
that picture?
Combs Ferry too.
Now he's lost his phone.
I always lose my phone.
He probably had lost it when he went to put the spider down.
One man spider apocalypse.
Oh wow! Holy moly!
Yeah.
Yeah.
What?
That's not like a little gate. You can see that dude at the bottom of the picture.
Yeah.
He's tiny compared to that gate. That gate's got to be all of 30 feet high.
Wow!
Yeah, tell me that was for bats to keep people out.
No. Wow. That's yeah. Wow.
You need a bulldozer to
massive.
remove that steel out of that.
I'm not even sure a bulldozer could do it, because it would be almost impossible to get one back there to that cave.
You damn near need to hit it with an artillery strike to knock it out of that thing.
Yeah, how they put that in place, because there's no road to it. It's all, you got to go in there on foot. So they had to have used something.
What?
I don't know if
About
they-
aircraft,
know what year
aircraft
they
maybe
put it in
helicopter.
It was 87 or 88 the last time I spoke to the Smiddles. So I would say they probably acquired the land because I left for the army after I graduated. So I would say they probably acquired the land sometime in 89, 90, 91 in that area. And the next time I went back out there was 92 and it was all shut down.
That's amazing. Wow.
That is
Yeah. You cannot convince me that's to keep people away from the bats.
it is one of the. When I first saw that, I was like, "Well, if that starts popping up around here, well,
Yeah, it's definitely a head scratcher.
Yeah, especially getting it in there. The only thing I could think of is helicopter or something like it do stuff here. But
Yeah, it would not have been easy to get that back there because, like I said, there's no roads.
did you see what Greg said?
yeah, I saw it.
I would have sold it for scrap iron."
Wow.
The North American meth head would have found a way to get it out of there.
Yeah, I guaranteed Greater North American Meth Head would have sold that for scrap if it was able to pull it out of there.
I've encountered a few of those bear
Bobby.
hunting. That's always. I'd rather encounter a Bigfoot than have to deal with one of them.
Jeff, I'm sending you another view of that
Wow.
same picture. Of that, not the same picture, but another view of that same cave.
Yeah, drag it in and weld it up. But still, you got to get the equipment in there too.
How did they? I don't understand how. Whoa.
Must be intriguing.
do
Whoa.
How in the? What? Yeah, I'm sending that one to you, Jerry. That's oh my god.
Yeah, that's just one of those local head scratching things. Like, if you wanted
Why
to
did
keep
you
people
put
out
that
of there for bats, you didn't need to go to that length.
That is not light steel either. How did you get
Oh,
all
no.
that there?
That is heavy duty steel.
It's almost like they built a road to go in there and then they destroyed the road afterwards.
Yeah, because there's no road to it. You've got to hike to it.
That's possible.
Did you see that part, Jerry?
What's that?
Did you see the one I just sent you?
Yeah. I'm looking at it. It's
Holy-
just, you know about building a fortress. My goodness. You know,
I'd be interested to see if it's like that in other parts of Missouri.
Well, when
That's-
Robbie and I went out there the first time, I've been out there quite a few times, and that place is it's near Grove Springs, Missouri, in Wright County, and it's in the middle of nowhere. And when I say it's in the middle of nowhere, I mean it's in the middle of nowhere. It's quite a few miles via gravel to get there.
Yeah, it looks like something from Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
yeah.
but it's not easy to get to. It is in the middle of nowhere. The first time I took Robbie down there, there were game wardens all over the place. So we kind of drove through and they were kind of watching us, and we just turned around and left. And then we went back later that night and there wasn't anybody there. There were some
right.
people
Why
there.
did they force everybody off and close it?
I don't know. Yeah, that's the head scratcher because the
How
family
much
did
acreage
not
was
want to
it?
give up their farm.
How much property was it, DA? Do you know?
I don't know how many acres they had, but it was a big chunk of that valley.
So they just took the whole property.
They took everything.
Why didn't they just put a gate up? Why did they just take the whole?
Yeah.
Because they're hiding something.
Yeah.
That's I
Well,
can't see
Just why do they
Any
close
other
down
reason?
campgrounds and this and
any
that?
other reason why you would take that much
There-
just take a whole farm.
There are a lot of Bigfoot sightings in that area, especially in and around Grove Springs. And you've read Jeff. You've read the Wild Hunt books, right?
Yep.
You know what's about 45 minutes, not even that, maybe 30 minutes from that cave?
What?
The south gate of Fort Leonard Wood.
Oh, that's right. It is.
There's a reason I set the Wild Hunt there.
makes you wonder, doesn't it?
That it do.
But our government doesn't hide anything from us,
Oh,
right?
no.
No.
As trustworthy as the day is long.
Just like those random power boxes in parks that don't have any electricity.
We found 2 of those in Joe Bald. Those 3-phase cable about yay big around.
And
We found 2 of them in Joe Bald, and that was all. Those were all primitive campsites with no power to any of them, and there weren't street lights in the park either. It was a primitive campground. There was no power needed for the park except at the guard shack at the front, and it's not even there. But there are 2 of those massive 3-phase boxes in the park in Joe Bald. We found them when we were poking around. I don't know what they're for. There's nothing they could be.
Like they're still hooked up.
Yeah, they did. Well, one of them has been busted over. I think meth heads got to it, but the other one looks like it could still be functional.
If they're going to tear everything else out, why leave that?
Yeah. Why are those there? What were they powering even when the park was open? Because there was nothing there for it to power.
I think they found stuff like that in LBL too.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they found random green power boxes in the middle of nowhere.
Yep.
Why would there be a power box in a
ventilating shafts?
The power box paradox.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you wonder why one of those ventilation shafts are for. Yeah.
I haven't found any ventilation shafts at Joe Bald, but I'm planning on, like I said, when the ticks and chiggers are not so much to deal with, I'm planning on going down there and doing some pretty intense rooting around.
Well, that's why I haven't really been doing anything here. It's been
the heat and the bugs are so bad this year.
Yep.
And the Missouri, I will say one thing positive about the Missouri Department of Conservation. They put out a warning that timber rattlers and copperheads are very bad this year in Missouri. Yeah. So when I go, I make sure I wear my snake gaiters.
We get timber rattlers and not so much timber rattlers, but we got plenty of copperheads.
And they will do some damage. They might not kill you with a bite, but you ain't gonna like it.
Oh, they'll make you sick.
They'll damn sure make you sick. And a timber rattler will kill you.
Yeah.
And those aren't the only venomous snakes we have in Missouri. Joe Bald is right there on Table Rock Lake, so cottonmouths and water moccasins are not out of the ordinary.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And August is their breeding season, so they're very active right now.
Yeah, we don't get them so much around the farm, but like if you go down towards the river or like up on the ridge here, you'll find them.
I'm always on the lookout over at the campground over here by the river. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Always on the lookout.
Especially
where we're at's up high, but
yeah.
still.
Like especially where you go, Jerry.
I have recently
looking out for where you go.
Oh yeah.
I recently acquired a 22 caliber pew pew that I'm going to put on the front of my. It's got Molly tabs on the holster, and I'm just going to put it on the front of my plate carrier and load it with bird shot. So it was snake shot. So anytime I find one,
yeah, yep, I don't mess with them, Dan.
I don't like snakes.
Nope, not at all.
But I'd rather deal with a snake than a spider. My mother always used to say there's only 2 kinds of snakes in this world. Kind of snake that'll kill you, and the kind of snake that'll make you kill yourself trying to get away from it.
Right. Yeah.
Spiders are like that too sometimes.
Yeah, I don't like spiders.
No. I don't care for spiders either. Obviously, the wife don't, as you've seen. So,
as was aptly demonstrated.
Oh yeah, she had a point to get across, so she threw that door open. She got her point across.
Yeah, you needed to kill a spider, and you needed to do it now.
Right away.
Yeah,
right away.
Live broadcast be damned. Get your ass in there and kill that spider.
Oh well.
Right.
Well, we're 2 hours in, Jeff.
You guys are going to Salt Fork, aren't you? Or are you going? Is that where you're going? I can't remember.
Me? Who?
Who
Us?
talking to?
I thought you and Robbie were going somewhere in October, aren't you?
Yeah,
You're
we're
going
going to be at it's called I always have trouble remember the name of the festival. It's in Greenville, Ohio, the 12th and 13th of October at the Bigfoot conference. And Robbie, help me out here. What's the name of that thing?
Greenville. Wow. I know right where that's at.
Robbie, what's the name of that conference? I mean, I know what it is, but I can never remember it. It's like Spirit of the Forest. Thanks, Robbie. It's called the Spirit of the Forest. It's a Bigfoot conference. Robbie's going to be teaching a class on tracking. I'm going to be there with books. I'm going to do a presentation there, talk about some of the expeditions we've gone on. Robbie probably be up there with me for that. We might actually have a Doc sighting too, waiting to find out for sure if Doc gets to go, but looks like Doc might be coming to that as well. And we'll probably be talking about, evidence collection. We'll probably talk about, tracking. We'll talk about first aid, because if you're going to be spending any time in the woods, by God, you need to know some first aid. You definitely need to have a kit and be prepared.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm going to be investing in one of Doc's kits here soon, I think.
I have several and I want more. I mean, it's one of those things that, one kit is great, two is fine, but if you don't have them on you, you ain't got it at all. So I've got one that I keep in the car. I've got one I keep in my go bag. I've got one I keep in my camera bag, and then I've got one for my expedition bag for when we're out in the woods. But I want to upgrade that.
Yeah. I'm going to be bear hunting the week before during the meet and greet, so I won't be available for anything that month. That week's gonna set me back when I get back to the farm, so I'll be playing catch up when I get back.
I wouldn't want to miss out on a bear hunt. I get you. I'm going to try to go to the meet and greet, but I don't know if I can afford two big trips in 1 month.
Yeah, I told him next year I'm wide open unless something crazy happens over here. I'll be somewhere.
Happy work, Mark. Happy work. Thanks for stopping in. Yeah, Greenville. I've stayed in Greenville before. We used to go to events out in Fort Recovery, Ohio. It's not too far away.
Jerry's been all over the place, tractor pulling.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, if you're interested and find yourself anywhere near Greenville, Ohio, on the 11th and 12th of October, come see us.
11th and 12th of October. Might do that. We'll see.
Jerry's gonna have to make sure he fixes the brakes on the RV.
That far, that quick of a trip, I'll probably just take my truck, stay in a motel out there somewhere. Robbie and I, and if Doc, if he's gonna be able to make it, him as well, we're gonna get there. Then I think it's the day of the 11th, and stay through that Monday morning, and then head back. So even once the show is over, there's probably a very good chance that me and Doc and Robbie will use our noses to find a local barbecue joint and see who wants to join us. Yeah,
exactly.
It's real simple. 70 west at 49 north. Get right into Greenville.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, it's a lot less of a ride for us than it is for you.
Yeah, maybe. It's quite a way out there from here.
I think it's 7 or 8 hours from here, from me.
You're closer. Yeah, they're closer.
When I was looking up how long it's going to take me to get down to Mark Green's, it's like 14 hours. I was like,
that's quite the drive. That's what we drive whenever we go to Myrtle Beach, South Carolina on vacation.
I mean,
we haven't been in a few years, but that's like 14 hours.
9 hours.
Yeah, LBL's a hike. That's probably 14.
LBL is just at 6 hours for me, just right at. And most of that's still in Missouri. I mean, once we cross over in Kentucky, it's only about an hour and a half to LBL. Most of it's still in Missouri.
Yeah, Bobby, Eaton, Ohio. Yep. Been through there.
He says conference starts on the 11th. So we're going to be there the day before it starts, kind of doing setting up. And I think they've got a meet and greet planned, I think. But, even if they don't, we might. If y'all are going to be in that area and want to come by and see us, I'll have my books there. I'll have some of the wild hunt patches. Robbie will have some of the stuff that he's made with like challenge coins and hats and stuff. So it's going to be a good time.
There you go, Jeffrey.
Yeah, I know. Too bad I'm gonna have my hands tied probably once I get home.
We'll make it happen at some point, I'm sure.
They always threaten me after I'm gone for more than a few days. They're like, "Don't do that for a long period of time again
Yeah.
for a while."
Yeah.
Seems like something always gets haywire while I'm out of town.
Well, maybe this time will be the exception. Maybe everything will go smooth as silk.
I keep harassing Spencer, telling him he's got to be better at planning his dates because every time he does, it's always when I'm going somewhere.
Yeah, I'll actually be
Well,
still scrub at night. Yeah.
This last meet and greet, we were planning on going to it, but about a month ahead of time, I was looking at the calendar, and I'm like, "Honey," she's like, "What?" I'm like, "Have you noticed something on the calendar?" She's like, "What's that?" I'm like, "That's the weekend that Nathan's getting married." That's my oldest. I'm like, she's like, "Oh, let me see if I can cancel the resort." So we didn't get to go because my oldest was getting hitched.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was actually out on the mountain getting around the same time they were doing the camp out. I was getting the activity with things snoring.
He's got him, Greg. Don't let him BS you. He's got him. He's got help over there.
I have them. It's just
Getting
somebody.
him to work.
They're here. It's just Dad can only deal with so much for a few days, and then I come back and he's like, "Don't do that to me again."
Oh well, guys, it's getting late.
Yeah.
Yeah,
in the
later
East
for you
anyway.
folks than me. I'm in Central Time.
Yeah, you got it made. It's only 9:19 there.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I do still need to put some words on paper tonight. So
Yep.
Yep.
And we're gonna have to get Robbie on here sometime.
Sure, absolutely. I'm gonna check his. I'm gonna check his show out too.
well, when you want to talk tracking, Robbie's your guy. And he's had plenty of experiences, and he's been to LBL, and he's been out with me a few times, and he's done some research in his own areas. Robbie's a damn good researcher in his own right. So I definitely think he could keep y'all entertained for a couple hours.
He's still tipping a coffee cup up. That's why he's still awake. But I've seen it put him to sleep too. So
Depends on what's in said coffee cup.
that's right.
Yeah, well, I got two different
Exactly.
cups.
Well, DA, we sure do appreciate you coming on, man. It's just a wealth of knowledge, and we appreciate you coming
Yeah, it's
on.
just
And
like
definitely,
My pleasure.
I'm
one of
looking
our
forward
friends
to
on
your upcoming sneak backs to those parks and just some
Oh,
new
we'll
information.
definitely be filming it.
Yeah, definitely going to be checking that out for sure. And, anything
And,
you got,
and
Jeff?
if I ever get to come to Missouri, I'll volunteer to be the last one on the boat.
Oh, generally that's me. I'm. Have you seen the movie We Were Soldiers?
Uh-huh.
My philosophy is I'm the first boots on the ground and I'm the last to leave.
Mm-hmm.
Just make sure you bring lots of peanut butter for Jeff. That's all.
No,
Or
I'm gonna be Greg. I'm gonna have a bunch of road flares strapped to me. And,
Or as Miss Naoma says, make sure she comes with a bottle of Sweet Baby Ray's.
There you go.
hey,
All right.
I'm gonna do I'm gonna be carrying a flare gun, so you know.
Well, yeah, I don't want to ruin the surprise for Jerry, but flare gun could be interesting.
Yeah. Gary will have to read that book. He'll understand
Yeah.
the flare gun reference.
Yeah, I'll be checking into those books. I don't get a lot of time to read, but I'm getting older now, so
Well, I'd love to hear what you think if you do
I'll
give
tell
them
you,
a shot.
I'd rather read
Absolutely.
books
absolutely.
than watch TV.
It's the only TV.
I'm the same. I'm not a big fan of watching much TV anymore.
The only TV I watch is YouTube, and that's Bigfoot, RV channels. That's it. That's all I watch, really. So I did watch the yellow today.
You like RVs?
Oh yeah, had RVs for years. Yeah.
There is a company you need to look into. I've been using some of their tech in my books. It's going to show up more, and if I start doing very well, I will have one of them. It's called Global Expeditionary Vehicles, Global X. It's from right here in Springfield. It was originally in Nixa, but they moved into Springfield, and they make off the grid RVs.
Yes. Yep. I think I've saw some information on them.
Their RVs are amazing. I mean,
Big money.
you know,
but you get
multiple
what you pay
independent
for.
drive systems so they can go
Yeah.
almost anywhere. Their
Yeah.
own water filtration system, solar panels. I mean, oh my God.
Oh yeah.
You want to go back in the back country and live for a couple of weeks. That's how you do it.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I've
It'd be
heard
a lot
about
better than pack frames like I've done.
it. Yeah, man. Yeah, camping's fun. Yep. All right. We appreciate. I'm sorry, Jeff. You done?
I'm good.
I'll shut up.
You're good.
I'm just having such a good time tonight.
Yes, absolutely.
For once we get a guest that hasn't like spontaneously combusted at the last minute or something.
It's easy to get me wound up to talking, but just ask my wife. It's much harder to get me to shut up once I'm going.
You and
Yeah,
I
the
probably
chat was
need
pretty
to be
good.
out in public together then, because it would probably not end well.
I think they pretty much covered the gamut in chat tonight. So we got everything from
Well,
chickens to
We'd end up on a road somewhere in the middle of nowhere poking something with a stick we probably shouldn't.
Probably wouldn't,
Yeah.
and it would not be the first time. Probably won't be the last.
Oh Lord.
Okay, yeah, just make sure. I didn't see any questions. So, all right, DA. Once again, thank you very much. I'm sure
Hey,
you'll
my
be
pleasure.
back in the future. And
I'd love to.
it's
Just
been
let me
a-
know when.
Yep,
It's
absolutely.
been a privilege having you on here.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
man, pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
Yeah, sure did miss our brother Blaylock tonight. I guess he was tied up and couldn't get
Yeah, he had something going
on here.
on.
So, yeah, that's okay. I'm sure he'll be back next week. We'll be back next Tuesday. I don't know who, but we'll have somebody here and talking about something. So, learn. That's what we do.
Yep.
Appreciate everybody in chat. Like, subscribe, share. Again, it's free. We appreciate it. All right, Jeff. Anything else there? Cracker tea.
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. See you next Tuesday.